This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Hello, everybody. What's hello in Egyptian? Should have looked that up before we started recording.
It's a man doing this.
Is that racist? I guess no one can see what you're doing. It feels like it's borderline, but maybe, maybe that is
if we're talking about an ancient Egyptian, like, what are they going to do? Get offended? They've been dead for thousands of years.
Well, anyway,
starting the episode with something
an accusal of racism
that begs the question: is that racist? And we didn't reach a definitive answer. Well, okay.
We're all learning. He did the like walk like an Egyptian pose.
What? It is a hieroglyphic.
It is a hieroglyph.
Is making jokes about hieroglyphics.
Yes.
Racist.
This article from Breitbart says no.
Oh boy, I really need to take a good hard look at myself. All right, well anyway, I couldn't have said it better myself. Welcome along, everybody, to Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. This is usually a podcast where myself, AJ, and my co-host Richard over there, every fortnight. I noticed you didn't say co-host / friend.
Well, maybe you're not anymore. Maybe we'll find out. We usually watch a different film franchise every fortnight, but for the past 3 weeks, we've been watching one split-up film franchise, and that film franchise is The Mummy.
Now I know what you're thinking.
This is not the Boris Karloff episode. This is not the Christopher Lee episode. This is it. This is what people have been waiting for. When you say The Mummy, you're probably thinking about one of the films we're talking about today. We of course split it up.
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
When I think Mummy, I think Jet Li.
We, of course, split these up because there are so many and we wanted to tackle them by era. This was, of course, voted on by our patrons a month and a half
Speaking
ago.
of eras, they voted for this.
And so we have watched a plethora of middling to probably pretty good when it came out Mummy movies over the last 3 weeks. And now we're up to the franchise which contains one film that people wanted us to talk about. So I hope it's worth it. This is the thing though. It's like, this is what people wanted. They were like, we want you to cover this one film so much that we will sit through 2 dry weeks of you talking about films we probably haven't seen, that we probably don't care about, because we want you to talk about this.
And then also a further 4th week of again films covering, that they don't really care about. But that's what you get, patrons. Yeah, like the thing that worries me about the current undertaking, rather than how detrimental it is to my mental health, that because I don't care about my mental health, is that like if you... I've
seen Bo Burnham's Inside, I'm fine.
Is that like if you are a casual listener of the Cult Popture podcast, maybe you got onto us because of the Barbie episode, and then after Barbie we did with the Get series, and you liked Forgetting Sarah Marshall when it came out, and then after that we did whatever, and you weren't so into it, but then the next one was George of the Jungle or whatever. That if you don't care about The Mummy, to have a podcast you're like, so barely interested in already, do 4 weeks of a franchise you don't care about, we've lost them as fans. And that's what really worries me about The Mummy, is that we're now a Mummy podcast.
Well, I mean, I like to think that I've been creating entertaining episode plans. I like to think that you've been entertaining as well, and that we've created podcasts where even if you don't know the films, you like our dynamic. Surely if you listen to 18 hours of us talking about Barbie, you can listen to probably under 4 hours of us talking about The Mummy. Or
we like to think of this as like a podcast for everyone.
Oh, do you want to do a plug?
No? A plug for what?
A plug for your other podcast, you bitch. You bitch. You cheating on me with another podcast. A podcast for everyone is a podcast that Richard has now joined as co-host. It already existed before him and will exist long after. But go check out A Podcast for Everyone if you want more of Richard and less of me.
But the podcast for everyone. I'm talking about subjects I'm much happier talking about than The Mummy.
You needed a podcast for everyone.
I did.
In your life.
So go check that out.
So we are going to be talking, of course, today, Richard, about the Brendan Fraser / Rachel Weisz-led trilogy, The Mummy, which includes The Mummy 1999, The Mummy Returns in 2001, and The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008. 2008. We're also going to be talking about the Tom Cruise Mummy movie from 2017. These are what's often referred to as the Stephen Sommers trilogy and the Dark Universe film, respectively. I may be thinking of calling this episode The Mummy Modern Movies, the Mummy movies that actually came out in your lifetime, the Mummy movies you've heard of. You know, there's a whole bunch of different titles.
I like the Mummy movies you've heard of.
But it doesn't fit the template, and my producer is fighting against the comedian inside me to title it the way all the others are titled. All right. Right now, at this moment, we stand in an interesting place. We are here on the edge of a very contentious episode, Richard. We're on the precipice of a podcast which will probably be full of personal attacks, ad hominem fallacies, false equivalencies, and just good old-fashioned friendship-ruining anger, you know? Because I don't remember the last time we had an episode of Film Franchise Fortnights containing a film we disagree on more. And I certainly don't remember the last time it was a film that I loved that you didn't love.
Yeah,
that feels less common than the other way.
Yeah, because you've seen The Mummy, you've famously seen 1999's The Mummy 10,000 times.
More, yep. And I hate it, and you love it.
And I've seen it, before this podcast, I've seen it once. And that was very much in my adult life.
Yes. So,
but I'm sure we'll get to that more.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to navigate this episode all week. Because, Richard, as you know, I hate conflict and I love agreeing with people. And so, all I can really say is, before we get into it, my friend, my co-host, I love you. And I apologize in advance if something I say hurts your feelings in the name of content. In the name of content, Richard, we have to dive in, and then as soon as we stop recording, dive back out and be like, hey, you okay, man? I love you. I don't know how else to manage this emotionally. So, listeners, sit back and enjoy a podcast of epic proportions where I, Alexander Jones, have the unenviable, almost impossible task of all in this episode, where I have to convince not only Richard Martin that his opinion is wrong, but that he's wrong at all. An impossible task. Will he narrowly escape it this time? Or will hell freeze over? Will the planets align? Will the moon move across the sun, spreading darkness across the land of Egypt? Let's find out. Yeah, thank
Mr.
you
Burns.
so much. I'm looking forward to every joke I make being like, I don't get that. So, the first film, and for the majority of this episode, the film we're going to be talking about is called The Mummy. This came out in 1999. It was directed by Stephen Sommers. Do you know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's like 61.
It is 61.
Yeah,
correct.
Which
I know
that wasn't me. Like I knew it was 60 or 61.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking like, oh, it's just barely fresh.
And I know that immediately puts a landmine in the middle
ball
of
in my court.
yeah, right. But I'm going to address it, but we have to get the admin out of the way first. So I will address the Rotten Tomato score. Do you want to tell us what this film is about?
So it's a remake of The Mummy. It's about
come on.
Talk about the wrong side of the river bit. So it's we flashback to ancient Egypt. And yeah, Imhotep gets a little bit too gay with the what's the
Vestal Virgins.
Yeah,
the line in the original Mummy movie is he got a bit too gay with the Vestal Virgins in the Pharaoh's temple. In this, he got a bit too frisky with the Pharaoh's daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, so the classic. He's in love with the forbidden love, and he's buried alive. And
tongue cut out, eyes cut out.
But in this case, he also gets a bunch of scarab beetles thrown in with him.
Which is a ritual for a curse called the Hamdai, or the Homdai, which for some reason means that when he comes back, he's very powerful, which seems like a bad curse for someone that you hate.
Well, the curse is supposed to be that he's cursed to be immortal, and there's these flesh-eating scarabs he's buried with, and that he's cursed to, for all eternity. But then they were like, I guess they already had a spell for immortality, but it also made you really powerful. And they're like, well, we're not writing another one.
No, it's like a devastating oversight in a code for a computer game.
Yeah.
Where you made something for one function, but you didn't consider a way it could be exploited.
And now he's got no fall damage.
Yeah.
So then we jump ahead to what I'm ashamed to say I didn't realize wasn't present day.
Wow.
Yeah. For some reason, I just assumed these movies took place in present day. It wasn't until the third one when it explicitly says the date, and I was like, I guess I haven't seen a computer.
It explicitly says the date in all three. I have seen the first two 10 billion times. I know it says the date in both.
But I say it wasn't until the third one when they say the date. I must have just
out loud. Out loud, you mean? It says it on the screen.
Yeah.
Like the date appears on the screen.
Yeah. But anyway, so we now catch up with our heroes. Rick O'Connell, played by Brenna Fraser, and Evelyn, played by Rachel Weisz. And then there's a few other side characters which will kind of just I guess. So you've also got Jonathan.
Yeah,
Carnahan,
his brother.
And Benny, who's his kind of little shithead sidekick. Brendan Fraser's little shithead sidekick, who inexplicably goes on all these missions with him, but it's just a little fucking weasel.
Yeah.
But anyway, Rick O'Connell ends up getting himself hanged. You put up for a hanging. But then Evelyn makes a deal to stop his hanging because he can find the lost tomb.
Hamunaptra, the city of the dead.
Yeah. And then it's an adventure movie in the same vein as Indiana Jones to get there, and they find this city, whatever. And then the mummy is awakened by reading the Book of the Dead out loud. And then he brings the mummy, not played by Billy Zane, might I add.
No.
Which you didn't care about, but this was a mind-blowing revelation for me. I've seen the movie before, and I was watching the movie, and I still thought it was Billy Zane.
This is so funny. You messaged me while I was the drunkest I've ever been at my birthday party last week, and you said, the mummy's not played by Billy Zane, and I very, very, too violently responded to this with of course he's not fucking played by Billy Zane, and you messaged me the next day, and I was like, hey man, that was the alcohol talking. I see the resemblance.
No, because you were like, I don't even fucking see I seen you a photo, photos of Arnold Vosloo and Billy Zane. I was like, these, I actually can't tell which one is supposed to be which in this photo, and you were like, get fucked, you fucking piece of shit. And then the next morning you're like, I'm the drunkest I've ever been. And I was like, And I was like, yeah, man, you were so drunk you thought Arnold Vosloo didn't look like Billy Zane. You were like, yeah, man, that was the alcohol. So that was very fun. But yeah, no, like legit, because I think when I watched it the first time last year, I'll get to the rest of the plot in a second.
Okay.
When I watched it for the first time last year, I remember thinking like I was halfway through the movie and realizing like in my life I've never actually seen what the mummy in this movie looks like. A
Mm.
similar thing that realizing like I don't know what the aliens in Super 8 look like. Not at all on the same
Yeah.
level, but like yeah, these two things. It's like it's weird that I've just never seen a picture of that, and especially like something like the Mummy, where it's like,
Mm.
But then realizing when he appears, I was like, oh, it's just because he's Billy Zane for most of the film, and then yeah, I watched the film, and then so for the last 18 months or whatever it's been, I've just gone around and being like, yeah, this is Billy Zane, and I've
You've
been telling
actively gone
everyone,
around.
um, yeah, I watched the Mummy
Do you
last
know
night.
that's
Billy Zane was really
Billy
good in
Zane?
it. And then yeah, my whole world came crashing down on Saturday night.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry I wasn't more sympathetic to that.
to my plight, like the amount of times you've messaged me something and said like, hey, I have to get this off my chest. Please don't make fun of me for it. I should have done that. AJ, I'm having an existential crisis. Please don't make fun of me. But did you know that Billy Zane is not Emotep? And you'll be like, yeah,
Billy
of
Zane's
course.
not even like isn't Billy Zane a white dude? He's not even like remotely Egyptian.
They look identical.
Don't look it up. Like just continue with the plot.
Anyway, now I'm on Stephen Summers' Wikipedia page.
Oh my god.
All right, yeah. So the kind of the big thing is that the 10 plagues come back to Egypt, and the 10 plagues are, of course,
They
water
don't go
into
into all of
blood,
them.
frogs, lice, wild animals, pestilence, boils, thunderstorm, locust, darkness, and the death of the firstborn.
The death of the firstborn doesn't actually happen in the film, though. They skip that one.
Yeah.
It's set in an alternate universe where there are only 9 plagues.
Yeah. Or they just miscount because they say 10 a bunch of times.
Also, fireballs raining from the sky is a very liberal interpretation of thunderstorms. So they take some creative licenses. It's fine. Continue.
Yeah, he like he does the whole like fall in love with the
Yeah.
Rachel Weisz and
Yeah. We've
yeah.
all done it.
And then how's Imhotep defeated?
They work out that the book that brought him back to life was actually the book of the dead. The book of Amun-Ra, and not the book of the dead. And so they find out where the other book is. They go back to Harmon-Aptra to save the girl, save the day, and they kill the resurrected version of Ankh-Sunamun, who is totally called Anak-Sunamun in this, right? That's totally how they say her name.
Yeah.
And then Imhotep is made mortal, and Brendan Fraser, Rick O'Connell, stabs him, and his soul is sent back to hell. And they ride off literally into the sunset together, having found the greatest treasure of all, love.
The mummy. Oh,
yeah. Sweet. All right, so just to fully expound and expand mean the same thing, and I'm never brave enough to use expound in case I've just misheard someone say expand my whole life.
Expound means to present or explain a theory or idea in detail.
Which you could just say expand for that as well.
Expound is sometimes confused with expand.
So just to get my position out up front, I very much grew up with this movie. I think I've probably seen it more than I've seen any movie. I'm not even kidding. Like, it's not 1,000,000 times, but it's a lot more than I've seen any other movie. My parents first showed it to me and my brother when I was 6, and I remember thinking it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen.
I thought that on Saturday.
Riddled with nightmares for a long time after seeing this, but we eventually got it on VHS. As I said last week, my brother was a big Egypt kid, so like this was like his his favorite sort of thing, and we got it on VHS, and my brother would basically watch it once every week.
My brother would basically watch it once.
But yeah, so
and I happened to catch most of it when he did.
This was playing maybe like once or twice every fortnight for what felt like years, but I was 7 or 8 years old, so I was probably like 6 months.
Mm.
I estimate I would have seen this film dozens of times between the ages of 6 and 12, though. And it very much shaped my love of movies, storytelling, heroism. All of this being said, watching this film for the podcast was the first time I'd rewatched it in around a decade, I think.
Wow.
But to quote Michael Swaim when he talked to us about Meet the Parents a few months back, The Mummy 1999 is a perfect film. Richard, what do you think of it?
But so to elaborate, expound on what I said before, somehow I had just never seen this movie. Like it's not something I'd actively avoided. I didn't have anything against it. I just like it's just this, it was this gap in my pop culture knowledge for so long, and then. Like I'd obviously heard people singing its praises and whatnot, especially you, and so
roughly 61% of movie critics I met as well.
And it's like, and for people of a certain generation, i.e., ours, that like this is like a lot of people have the same experience you did. I don't know how I never saw this at a sleepover or at a birthday party or anything around that time. And yeah, I reiterate, I've never avoided it until we started the podcast, and I just generally would avoid franchise films. But then, last year, I believe it was during lockdown. I can probably tell you the actual date on my Letterboxd. But I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to put The Mummy on and give it a fighting chance. And I watched it, and I was like, okay. I can see what the fuss is, and I can see that if you had watched this at a certain time in your life, I can see, because it's one of those things. It's like it's scary. It is genuinely quite scary in parts, especially for like people of the kind of age it's aimed at. I've talked before about like how they don't really make kids movies that are genuinely scary anymore. It's not really a kids movie, but it's pre-teen teen movie. And so I would, I got it, okay? But I think that I thought the 61% is kind of a warranted score. I gave it 3 out of 5, which is essentially 61%, because
fuck you.
Jesus.
Sorry, I don't know what came over me.
But I think that maybe nostalgia does some of the heavy lifting for people.
I don't get it, man. Last week
you love this movie. You don't even get it.
I don't get you. I don't get you, Richard Martin. It's romantic. You're a complex. Well, I just can't seem to quit you or understand you. But last week you rated Fast and Furious 9 5 stars on Letterboxd, and you begrudgingly gave this 3 stars. And for years now, I've watched you. And you've sort of admitted to this as well, like off your own, you've said like you kind of have a slightly more generous system for rating movies than others. And so I've talked to you so many times about how it's a shame adventure movies that are kind of like this don't really exist anymore, and how they don't make movies like this anymore. And not only is this, I think, the best example of a film which is 5 stars because of how fun it is, but it's also the quintessential adventure movie that doesn't get made anymore film. I'd be willing to bet that when people talk about that long forgotten genre, that this is the movie they're thinking of. This is a perfect film. This is a perfect 5-star adventure movie that they don't make anymore. Like you seem to have such a reverence for that genre, and this is the best example of that genre, and you're like, it's all right. And I also want to acknowledge how at the start I was like, we've never disagreed on a movie before this much before, and you're like, yeah, it's pretty good. Like that's how much we're disagreeing.
Okay. If you'll allow me to continue, if you're quite finished. So that was my experience when I watched it on the 3rd of June 2019. Now, if you'll allow me to update my thoughts.
That wasn't during lockdown. That was a year before.
I Yeah, so when I watched this last Saturday, I thought, you know what, this is a perfect film. Nah, it's not.
What?
Yeah, I love
Ah.
this. Like, what's better for you? What would you prefer if I came in and was like, yeah, man, this is a perfect film, and then you have to throw out all your notes,
I would have loved to.
all the names
Yeah.
you're ready to call
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
or if I'm
Love
like,
to have done that.
yeah, I take I think Pirates of the Caribbean is better than The Mummy, and I think that's the example of like to me that's the example I'm picturing in my head when I say those kind of movies they don't make anymore because they've just been replaced with the superhero movie. The Mummy is it's hard. It is hard. So like
it's like you're strangling me or you're suffocating me with a pillow and you're like, shh, it's okay. It's okay.
like this is one of those things where I'm probably going to agree with like 90% of what you say. I could easily give this 4 stars. I think it's funnier to give it 3, which is why I did it.
I knew it was personal.
But yeah, I will say, and I wrote this in my review, that okay, I'll sing the movie's praises first off. Brendan Fraser at his peak is like everything you could ever want in a hero, not just like an action hero, but like a leading man. It's like the charisma that Brendan Fraser brings to the screen in like the 90s, very early 2000s, like is on the same level as Michael J. Fox's Marty McFly, who's the greatest film protagonist of all time.
Agreed. That won't be the first comparison to Back to the Future that gets made on this podcast.
And I will say that, like, for the most part, this film is incredibly paced. Like, it flew by. It does lose me, like, when Billy Zane is like not Billy Zane is returned to like his full human form, because a lot of the movie is him kind of hellraisering himself back to human form.
Not the last time we'll hear Hellraiser brought up on this
podcast. But that like then that the film kind of like, to me, that's when I kind of lose the pacing a little bit, and the film starts to drag and then rush and whatnot. It is genuinely scary. The opening scene, like being buried alive, should be the scariest thing I've ever seen on screen, and in this movie it is. And the addition of the scarabs, terrifying. Like that's horrific. And when they uncover when they open up the sarcophagus and he's been clawing from the inside, that is a genuinely terrifying image. And it's weird, and we'll get to this later on, but it's weird that it's not that scary in the 2017 one. Yeah, I guess I can't even necessarily articulate, other than the third act kind of losing me a little bit, I can't really articulate why I don't love it as much as you do. And I think that I know you're going to be unwilling to meet me on this, but it is that like this is a pretty good, maybe even pretty great film that was so formative to you. So you've got this like intensely personal connection to it. If you remove that personal connection, you're just left with a good film, you know?
Richard, I'm not like other girls. I'm not blinded by nostalgia in that same way. I genuinely think I am able to separate those things, even if I still claim to like a bad movie that I enjoyed when I was younger. I could still acknowledge that it's bad. Great examples of this: Space Jam. Loved Space Jam when I was a kid. Now I think that movie fucking sucks. The Cat in the Hat, a famously bad movie. I went to the cinemas by myself to see that movie when I was like 11 because I was so excited for it. If you listened to our Patreon very recently, Big Trouble is a great example of a film.
But see, the thing here is you've just listed 3 bad movies, like 3 objectively bad movies. I'm talking about like, this is a good movie that you are conflating to be the most important piece of cinema that's ever lived because it was to you, you know? Like, I'm not disagreeing with you on the quality of the film necessarily, but you are taking it over the finish line where it kind of stumbles short for me. And I'm not saying this is a bad movie. I'm not at all. I think it's on par with the 2017 film.
Well, that's fucked! That's such a fucked up thing to say! Why would you say that? That's such a strange thing to say after talking about what you like about this one. to then be like it's on par with this like really bad version of it.
Universally bad. No, it's not. It's better than that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna try my hardest to think of a movie that I think is roughly the same quality that would be like, oh, okay, I can understand then how if someone was super attached to it, they would think it's better, you know?
Because The Mummy occupies this like shelf in my brain where it's like, these are my favorite movies that I don't tell people are my favorite movies because they're everyone's favorite movies, right? And it's like, I think of this the same way that I think of Back to the Future or Jurassic Park. Two films I probably prefer to The Mummy and are objectively more impressive in terms of filmmaking. But the amount of fun I have with like the characters and the plot and the romance and the comedy, I feel like this film has it all. And even though it's not as much of a filmmaking marvel as something like Jurassic Park, the like superficial elements of it are operating at such a high level that it creates something with a lot more depth than similar films to this, I guess. And I feel like part of my mission here that I will, of course, fail at, because I totally understand that how hard it is to change someone's mind, but it's not changing your mind, it's changing your like emotional connection, which is impossible.
Yeah, you're just trying to give me what, like,
beating you over the head with it.
like 20 years of film love.
Yeah. I guess ultimately my feelings are sorrowful because I feel like you have missed out on something, I guess.
Well, I have my own experiences from my childhood.
No, you don't, Richard. Like, I guess it fails to compute with me that you... Well, it sounds like you've been playing up how much you don't like the movie a little bit, considering that you just said you made it a 3 stars as a joke. But like, because you really
it's a high
enjoyed
3 stars.
You really enjoyed National Treasure, for example, the new Jumanji movies.
National Treasure is a perfect example of the same kind of quality of
lower
film.
tomato score than The Mummy, I checked, because I knew it would come up.
Well, what's National Treasures?
46.
It's close enough. But like that's the same kind of thing that like we both really liked those movies. But if you imagine layering in 20 years of nostalgia for it, you're going to think it's better than that.
But you're also a big fan of the Uncharted games, yeah? Would you say you're a big fan of Uncharted?
I feel like you're trying to trap me.
Genuinely
yes,
not.
Uncharted 2 is the greatest game ever made.
That's my honest opinion. Aha! Like I would argue that they're doing the same thing as The Mummy. Like, it's a different medium, so maybe that's where the difference is. But like, I certainly think Uncharted has less interesting characters than The Mummy. Like all up, you've got like Sully's kind of a fun character, but I feel like
Nate and Elena.
I like them. I like them, but they're not the same. They're not like cartoon characters like they are in The Mummy. You know, The Mummy is a live action cartoon, similar in ways to like Back to the Future. And another movie that qualifies. Yeah, Hellraiser.
I think maybe if The Mummy had like a train level, I could then get on.
There is a PS1 game that I'm sure means a lot to people who grew up with it. I've written here, Richard, that I take less issue with the abstract concept of someone not loving this movie and more issue with Richard Martin, famous lover of every movie he's ever seen, not loving this movie. That's what I think it is. I think this whole time, that's what it's been, is like just that thing of watching you give 5-star rating after 5-star rating, and then you get to the dictionary definition of a 5-star rating.
This is not the dictionary. It's got 61% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I can explain. Right, you want to talk Rotten Tomatoes? Here's what I've written about Rotten Tomatoes. So,
I feel like I'm being so reasonable.
We're putting on a show. Do you want me to be
this is real.
Okay,
none of this is real. The Mummy, I've watched it 1,000 times. I just pretended to for the podcast, not to for the podcast.
So, in a rare moment of betrayal from my beloved Rotten Tomatoes, because despite the negative rap on Twitter that Rotten Tomatoes gets all the time, you bring up a Rotten Tomatoes score and like an internet debate, and people are like, you listen to Rotten Tomatoes? Well, like, I agree with Rotten Tomatoes a lot.
If it disagrees with you, they go, pfft.
Yeah.
And if they go, if it supports their theory, they go, no, look, it's got 100%
Yeah.
on Rotten Tomatoes.
So-
Jeremy is a famous fucking user of that. Like, if it supports my theory, it's good. If it doesn't, it's bad.
So a 61 audience score, a critic score, sorry, does roughly translate to 3 stars out of 5, right? But it's, I think...
Where have I seen this movie get 3 stars out of 5 before?
But it's undeniable that there has been a pretty significant critical reevaluation in the last 22 years. The Guardian posted an article this week called The Mummy, Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's adventure romp catches lightning in an urn, which echoes the same reverence that fans and critics alike have been parroting since this movie and got its initial contemporary reviews, I guess.
Sure.
And upon its 20th anniversary, there was a whole celebration of like revisionist reviews from like all the big websites that would have given it the reviews in the first place. I've got a few here. Thrillist and Den of Geek called it a perfect movie. Rotten Tomatoes itself referred to it as the Indiana Jones for the new generation. Junkie
Indiana Jones 3-star movie. There's another one.
Junkie declared it the pivotal blockbuster of the 90s. Collider and Sci-Fi Wire praised Brendan Fraser specifically for setting the mold that other action hero characters have followed in the decades since, and Looper noting that the film had proven to be a truly timeless classic that can be watched over and over again, and that it helped change the game for many action movies that would come after the film's release. In other words, Richard, while the barely fresh Rotten Tomatoes score would suggest you have all the horses, I would argue that the palpable critical reevaluation suggests you're also on the wrong side of the river.
What's that from?
That's a quote from The Mummy. I am shaking with anticipation. I was so worried I was going to fuck up that delivery, but I...
Well, congratulations. Another
Thanks
film
so
with
much.
61%, which I think is objectively better than The Mummy, is A Little Battle Angel.
Fuck off! That's 61%. I'll give it that. But no, if someone grew up with Alita Battle Angel, I could totally get
Thank
it.
you! That's what I've been fucking saying this whole time!
I agree that concept exists. I think The Mummy is objectively a 5-star film. Guess how many stars Roger Ebert gave this?
It's either going to be 4 or like half of 1.
He gave it 3 stars, but it's out of 4 stars, so it's still higher than you. He wrote that this is a great review. There is hardly a thing I can say in its favor.
He wrote, "This is a great review."
There is hardly a thing I can say in its favor except that I was cheered by nearly every minute of it. I cannot argue for the script, the direction, the acting, or even the mummy, but I can say I was not bored, and sometimes I was unreasonably pleased. Does unreasonably pleased not like sing some of the greatest movie moments you've ever seen to you? Like Back to the Future is unreasonably pleasing. The Fast and Furious movies are unreasonably pleasing.
F9, fuck yeah.
Some of them are, not F9.
Okay, I'm looking at other 61% Rotten Tomatoes movies.
Okay.
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
No, I haven't actually seen it. Maybe it's great. Maybe if I grew up with it.
Yeah, these are all movies that like you could see someone saying this is the greatest movie ever. It's objectively a 5-star film. I'm above my own nostalgia.
But
Crank,
no one's saying that
300
about these films, though.
You are.
No,
I'm quoting you.
sorry. I'm saying no one's saying no one who grew up with 300 is like started a mass critical reevaluation of it. Like The Mummy is significant in that sense that it seems like whenever you tell a filmy person that it only has 60%, 61%, they go, "What the fuck?" You know, like it seems that
The
seems
same
to
as
be...
K-19 the Widowmaker.
that seems to be that seems to be a more ubiquitous experience with specifically The Mummy than any other film with a surprisingly low Rotten Tomatoes score.
Well, anyway, I want to list off some more films that have the same
Okay.
Rotten Tomatoes score. American Pie.
Yeah, that's a 61% film. Yeah.
69% film. What else have we got? Happy Gilmore, Mystery Men, Rush Hour. I feel like Rush Hour is on a similar kind of
I haven't seen
vibe.
Rush
I haven't
Hour,
seen
isn't
Rush
it
Hour. Yeah, like that's a similar kind of like a lot of people grew up with that and will defend it.
Do you reckon it's just because you and I are in we're not queer, but we're in queer circles. I think we have a lot of queer friends, and Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser are two incredibly attractive people in this movie. I wonder if it's just the circles we're in are like all attribute their like sexual awakenings to this movie. Maybe that's why. I think
Yeah.
about that a lot.
I see. I was only sexually awoken on Saturday.
Really? What with? Oh, with the mummy.
Yeah.
Nice. I've got here things I love about the Mummy in depth. I prepared this assuming this podcast would just be you be going like, name something you actually love about it instead of just saying you love it. So I've got, fuck you, Richard. I've got a list here of things I love about the Mummy. Would you like to hear them? This isn't as violent as I was anticipating, so now I've just got a list of things I like about this film. So going off the Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz thing, I think they have excellent chemistry in this film. I think they ace just a sexually fueled will they won't they. It's there from the start where she gets drunk and she's
when he sexually assaults her.
Okay, I knew this would happen. Yes, there's some dated stuff in it. There's dated stuff and everything. But when she's like.
I didn't realize you were so easily write that off.
No, there's a great, the when in Always Sunny in Philadelphia when Charlie tries a pear for the first time. There's a great adaptation of that clip I've seen in a meme that was like, everything's problematic, bitch. We got to teach you how to watch media and still watch problematic media and still enjoy it. Anyway. The part where
Sounds
she's like
a great meme
where she's drunk and she's like, and I am going to kiss you, Mr. O'Connell, and it's like, it's such a it's so steamy. It's such a steamy relationship, and I so buy in every time I watch it. I'm like, you say what you will, but Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz are great as an on-screen playing off each other. I love that Brendan Fraser. His George of the Jungle skills allow him to expertly like jump back and forth between being a comedy hero and an action hero. Yeah, swing back and forth. Rachel Weisz is like a naive but determined heroine. I love how she isn't just relegated to, oh, come and save me. I'm just a romantic side plot. But she drives the story. She awakens the mummy. Like she's technically the inciting incident of the film.
Which is like. I feel like waking the mummy was a bad thing, though.
No, but it's cool that she still has agency in her own story and that she's imperfect and that she's...
It's a very Eve thing to do as well.
Eve.
The character. From the Bible.
Oh, right. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Sure.
And her name's Evelyn as well. I wonder, honestly, that might have been intentional.
I like how she fights back. She's in multiple like fist fights in this movie. She uses her intelligence, her strengths. She is technically a damsel in distress at one point in the film, but I feel like she's still the best damsel in distress ever put to film. John Hannah's Jonathan, who plays Evie's brother, he is such a great character, and I think he is a very seldom talked about secret ingredient of this film. He's a lovable scamp. He's a sleazy but well-meaning guy who sets up some of the best sequences in the film. He has some of the best lines in the film. I always really liked Jonathan. And John Hannah is like one of those actors whose name I learned when I was very young, and so I've kept up with John Hannah's career as I've grown older.
What was his most recent film?
I don't know about his most recent, but he was in that... what was that show with Lucy Lawless? The Spartacus? He was in Spartacus. That was a big thing he did in the last...
That was a wee while ago now,
15 years. Yeah, maybe I haven't kept up. Benny, the skeezy weasel dude, is the best character in this movie, and I think one of the reasons the sequel isn't as good, again, the platonic ideal of the snivelly... in it for his own, whatever keeps him alive, kind of like no integrity, no backbone kind of character. I love it. I love to hate. He's got such a fun, he's got like a Russian accent and he talks like this. And it's such a great choice for that actor Kevin someone. I've got his name written down later. It's not
Kevin J. O'Connor from The Love Bug.
Yes, thank you. So I feel like similar to Gollum from Lord of the Rings, like this guy that you love him, but you hate him, but you also hate to love him and love to hate him. And if The Mummy 1999 was ever adapted into like a Broadway show, Benny is who I'd want to play. He's the Biff Tannen of the film. But I think I'd probably get cast as Winston, who's the random, perpetually drunk World War II veteran.
I don't think he'd be cast.
I always loved how Rick still tries to save Benny from the sinking tomb at the end, despite everything. It's like a very late in the game save the cat moment. Like they're escaping this tomb as it's sinking into the sands, and he's like crawling under the crushing thing, and he's like, O'Connell! And he's like, Benny, come on. And I just think that says a lot about Rick as a character, that he's, you know, I think that's really nice. Arnold Vosloo / Billy Zane as Imhotep. I think he succeeds because it feels like he's from a completely different movie, in the sense that this is a movie full of cartoon characters, but he's like, I am an undead Egyptian high priest who's going to take over the world. And I think it adds a lot of depth to the performance. We've talked before about how scary it is, so I really love that. I think the scariest moment in the film, the one thing I remember, is when Isaac, who is one of the American explorers who takes a canopic jar, he's the one that kind of looks like Josh Brolin, and also auditioned to play Rick O'Connell. And when I first watched this movie when I was 6, I thought they were the same character. So when he died, I was like, did the main character just die? When he gets the life sucked out of him, the image of his corpse like scarred me. It's the scariest of all the deaths, I think. On that, we talked about this last week, but it is so great that they finally realized that the mummy's MO should be supernatural in nature. Like, he sucks the life out of you. He doesn't strangle you. He levitates you and, you know, pulls the breath from your lungs.
Rips your fucking eyes out.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's baller. And what might be a cute little nod to the dozens of films that came before it, when Imhotep is being defeated and he's having some of his powers stripped away, he strangles Rick. He's like, Rick goes blue in the face before Evie calls out the curse and sends him back to hell. He's strangling him. So, like, he still strangles. It's almost like how in Spectre
the Angry Birds movie. Sorry.
No, it's like how in Spectre they bring up that Bond was taught how to ski when he was young. And we were like, oh, that's why he skis in so many of the early films. The climax is so good. I love how all three heroes will have a part to play. Jonathan is established as like the pickpocket, and he pickpockets the key from Imhotep when he's being attacked by him. Evie, the brains, reads out the inscription, which makes Imhotep immortal, and Rick, the muscle, ultimately kills him. I love the scarab beetles. I think they're so scary. I love literally all the characters in this film. I love Mr. Burns, who's the guy with the glasses. He loses his glasses and sees a blurry version of the mummy in the temple, which we talked about is like sort of a repeated beat from one of the Hammer movies, but it's way scarier in this film, I think. And lastly, in another Marty McFly Back to the Future comparison, there is a cadence to Brendan Fraser's voice that encapsulates action-adventure comedy to me.
I cannot wait because I know you're about to try to.
I don't know if I can do it, but do you know what I mean? It's like a rough, tough,
I want you to do it.
Talks like this when he's trying to save the world, but then when he first sees the mummy and it roars at him, he goes, ah! Like back at it, and it's just it's a cracking, breaking in the voice that is superficially action and comedy together. You know, silliness and seriousness together. So yeah, those are the things I could think of that I love about the Mummy.
Cool. I don't disagree with them.
Okay, we're on a pleasant experience for us both then.
Before we started recording this podcast, like AJ, like it was a good 5 minutes explaining to me like, I'm gonna get personal.
Not personal.
I know this is gonna be a combative episode, and it's like I'm not that, steadfast in my opinion on the Mummy.
Well, because you hate the Mummy so much, Richard. How about this? How about I tell you Mummy movies that almost happened, and you can tell me if you think this would have been a better movie than what we got.
Okay.
I'll give you an opportunity to really piss me off, because I know that's what you want, you piece of shit. You are subverting expectations by decidedly not pissing me off and removing the armor I brought to the episode.
Yeah.
So these are essentially, obviously, there wasn't a Mummy movie since the 60s, 30 years basically there was no Mummy
80s,
movie.
wasn't it?
71. Yes, so 71 was the Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. No, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
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 So between then and then, there was no Mummy movie made. But there were talks of remake happening as early as the 1980s. Clive Barker of Hellraiser fame was
Well, I never thought I'd hear his name again.
was attached to a Mummy movie that was reportedly a lot gorier, bloodier, and a darkly sexual realization of the story, which would have also included a transgender mummy, with the story revolving around the head of a contemporary art museum who turns out to be a cultist trying to reanimate mummies in modern-day Beverly Hills. He has said he still wants to make it. So...
That's my continue the franchise.
Is that better than the one we got? I want you to remember what Hellraiser movies are like before you answer.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm fascinated by it, and like a super low budget version, and I think it would have been interesting to see that.
Clive
I don't
Barker,
think it would have been as well received, but Clive Barker is more of an interesting mind than he is a good filmmaker.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Joe Dante of Gremlins and Looney Tunes Back in Action fame was approached and wanted to cast Daniel Day-Lewis as the Mummy. While his version was ultimately too expensive for Universal, a few elements, including flesh-eating scarab beetles, did make it into the final film.
I think that could have been a good film. Like, Joe Dante is probably a good director to do a mummy film, especially if Universal was looking to do something along the lines of what ended up happening. Yeah, you would call Joe Dante.
George A. Romero of Night of the Living Dead fame wrote a screenplay wherein the mummy of Imhotep is brought back to life with museum MRI rays, where he readjusts to society and begins a relationship with the female lead of the film, who is also a reincarnation of Imhotep's long-lost love, and then he resurrects the mummy of Carice, who goes on a murderous rampage. I think that sounds pretty bad, to be honest.
I think they would just fit in with any other mummy movie.
Well, in any other George A. I agree. It would feel like an old school mummy movie, and like George A. Romero classically not realizing that like it's a mummy movie, you can use curses to like he's still the mummy's still brought back to life in a zombie science fiction way and not a mystical way, which is like you can do that with the mummy. And finally, Mick Garris of Critters 2, the main course fame, and Wes Craven of A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream fame were also approached but left the project. There is no information about what they were going to do. But they were attached at one point. But ultimately, Stephen Sommers of The Jungle Book 1994 fame pitched an 18-page treatment of The Mummy to Universal in 1997 as a kind of Indiana Jones or Jason and the Argonauts, where the mummy as the creature giving the hero a hard time. That was the log line almost, or what differentiated it from the other Mummy movies. Sommers had seen the original film when he was 8 and wanted to recreate the things he liked about it, but on a bigger scale. At the time, Universal's management had changed in response to the box office failure of Babe, Pig in the City, of George Miller fame. And the loss led to the studio wanting to revisit its successful franchises from the 1930s. Universal liked the idea so much that they approved the concept and increased the budget from $15 million to $80 million. In 2019...
It's so funny being like, what did our Talking Pig movie didn't do too well. Well, okay, what worked 60 years ago?
In 2019, Sommers claimed the film cost $62 million, which is, I think, more than what Joe Dante's version was going to cost, which was turned down because it was going to cost too much. But that's filmmaking, right? That's the business. That's Hollywood, right? Like missed opportunities like that, you know.
Damn. Makes
All right,
you think.
I've got some dumb IMDb trivia for you. You ready?
Is this the longest we've ever talked about a film on Film Franchise Fortnights?
Oh,
We're
not
almost
at all.
an hour in and we're not onto the second
No,
film yet.
this happened with like Planet of the Apes. Like this
It happened with Barbie as well, actually, now that I think about it.
So, dumb IMDb trivia. This is, of course, our segment where if you go on IMDb and you look at the trivia section, a lot of it is very clearly written by imperfect humans and not the most objective stances can be written in here. This first piece is technically not that dumb, but I've added to it making it dumb. So I've never done this before. I've constructed what could be a piece of dumb IMDb trivia.
Right, okay. So this is just dumb AJ trivia.
So what's interesting, it's actually interesting mummy trivia followed by a funny point that I want to make.
Right.
Brendan Fraser nearly died during the scene where his character was hanged. Rachel Weisz remembered that Fraser stopped breathing and had to be resuscitated. That's terrifying. That's a great piece of trivia. I think we should add to it. This would have made the film the second mummy movie in a row to have a person die on set. Because the director of Blood from the Mummy's Tomb died on set.
Yeah.
All right. In one scene, Benny is shown a sack full of gold, which he is trying to load onto a camel. As Benny pulls the camel by the reins, but the camel doesn't budge. The camels all, for some reason, hated Kevin J. O'Connor.
That's so funny. So do audiences.
Leonardo DiCaprio was rumored to have been offered the role of Rick O'Connell. It's believed. Who believed it? I'm sorry, IMDb trivia. Who believed this? That DiCaprio was said to have loved the script and wanted to be in the film. However, he had already agreed to star in The Beach 2000. It's also been said that DiCaprio asked if The Beach could be delayed so he could film The Mummy, but producers refused. However, the filming of The Beach was delayed anyway.
I would honestly...
That's Hollywood, baby!
I'd probably like Leo. I actually was thinking about this on the way home, that I was going to mention that... The Mummy feels like the Leonardo DiCaprio of films, in that it's this like objectively good thing that everyone else is into, but I'm just not.
Yeah.
But I would probably like this movie and Leonardo DiCaprio more if he had started it.
No, but you don't want to take one of the
you don't
only
want to
good
lose
roles from Brendan Fraser's tumultuous life. This is all he has in a lot of ways.
Imagine if like swapping the careers of Brendan Fraser. Imagine being like, save Leo. What happened to Leonardo DiCaprio? And then he gets a voiceover role on Doom Patrol, and although Brendan Fraser's starring in Darren Aronofsky's next film. He's playing a 600-pound man in a film called The Whale, and I'm very excited to see it.
Nice. All right, the novelization, there's going to be a lot of dumb IMDb trivia that I reckon is written by the one person that read all the novelizations, and I just find that it's like when someone brings up the extended universe when you're talking about Star Wars.
Or when someone doesn't like films because they're not like the comic versions.
Yeah. So this is the piece of trivia. The novelization gives some details that probably would have been difficult to convey in the movie, such as some of the Carnahan's backstory and the cause and effect of their parents' deaths. Among other things, pouring the scarabs into Imhotep's sarcophagus wasn't just to torture him further, it's an essential part of the ritual that they would eat his flesh, and when he became desperate, he would eat them, and this would continue for years. This dark mockery of the cycle of life was an important aspect of making him immortal so that he would suffer forever. There was a lot of detail in the original script that was cut for pacing, including an expansion on Imhotep's backstory and the rest of the plagues, and a tidbit explanations on minor issues. I'm sure that's...
The thing about the scarabs is really interesting. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. Despite the name, the title character is never mummified. I've never thought about this. His followers are, but he is subject to a different death. I was like, no, that's not right. I looked up what mummification means. Imhotep isn't mummified. He's buried alive, but he's not mummified. It's like they thought mummification meant being wrapped in bandages and put in a coffin. When Jonathan accidentally brings the army of mummies to life, they go after O'Connell. Brendan Fraser runs across skeletons that are floating in the water to get away from the mummies while making the same sort of noises that his character George makes from George of the Jungle 1997. I remember this because I've seen the movie 100 times. He runs across them and goes, ooh, 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 which I don't think is a George of the Jungle reference.
Yeah. And like, his character sounds like George of the Jungle throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
Because of the same actor.
The white cat seen in Evelyn's apartment is given no name in the film, but in the movie novelization, the cat's name is revealed to be Cleo.
Like Cleopatra.
Some of the Americans mock the heroes discovering Imhotep's juicy mummy by saying that maybe if they dry it out, they can sell it for firewood. Many mummies actually were destroyed by ancient tomb robbers using them as such. Viewers who actually know something about ancient mummification practices will know that Evie's claims that a red-hot implement was used for brain extraction is incorrect, which suggests she was amusing herself by intentionally trying to gross Rick O'Connell out. This was written by someone who loves Egyptology, but also loves this movie and was trying to trying to battle with the inconsistency, the inaccuracy of how Evie describes mummification. She's probably entertaining herself, okay? Actor Jonathan Hyde, who in this film portrays a British Egyptologist, is in fact an Australian. He was born in the city of Brisbane, which is the capital city of the state of Queensland. This becomes a different fact halfway through. It's so weird. O'Connell bets he'll beat the Americans in the competing camp camp to Hamunaptra. He makes this bet because he has camels and they have horses. He made the bet on the boat before he'd got to the camels.
Okay.
It's written terribly, and that's not. He didn't make it because they had camels. The camels aren't as fast as horses. During the filming of the scene with the scarab crawling under his skin, Omid Djalali chose not to wear underwear for some reason. As a result, his genitals kept falling out of his pants during takes as he was writhing in pain. The editor had to cut around the unintentional nudity as much as possible. However, if you watch the scene closely, you can still see some of the unintended nudity on screen for a few frames during one shot as he is screaming, "Help me," and grabbing his pants. There was an eerily similar piece of dumb IMDb trivia when we did The Little Mermaid. It's like, you see your butt for like half a second. All right. Final piece of dumb IMDb trivia for The Mummy 1999. I want you to just tell me when you want me to stop talking. All right? I'm just going to go and you tell me when you've had enough of hearing this piece of trivia. All right?
Okay, stop.
The revolvers O'Connell carries throughout the movie are Model 1873 Camelot Delvine,
I've
11mm, often dual-wielding them in a unique way of loading them by spinning the cylinders. Maybe if the ejector rod had been pulled back and the loading gate is open, all he has to do is point the loading gate downwards using the force of gravity and cylinder spinning to make sure all the cartridges are ejected. His arsenal also includes a Winchester 1897 shotgun, a Colt M1911, a period-authentic pre-1924 M1911, and not an M19... I'm a quarter of the way through it.
I know you are. That's why I want you to stop.
Yeah.
That Omid Jalili, who gets his dick out, he also appears in Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, Sex and the City 2, which we've covered, and in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. He's the customs officer who hits on everyone.
I think I knew that. I think I recognized him when I watched that movie. Nice. All right, The Mummy Returns came out in 2001. It was also directed by Stephen Sommers. Do you know what it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Like 30?
It's got 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. Can you tell me what is this film about?
So in this one, The Mummy Returns.
Oh.
So this one introduces the Scorpion King, played by Dwayne The Rock Johnson, in his... Is it his first acting role?
His first non-wrestling role, yeah.
Yeah. So it flashes back and it's like his army's defeated and they're forced to wander the desert, and then he's given immortality essentially.
He makes a deal with Anubis that he can, if he can command the army of Anubis, then he'll be given immortality.
Yeah, and so in this one, Imhotep's resurrected. Evelyn and Rick have a kid now. And yeah, we kind of end up the thing culminates in like they have to fight the mummy again, but then they don't like team up to fight the bigger evil, but the actual Scorpion King, who's now part Scorpion, interrupts their battle. There's a lot more plot in the middle.
So it's essentially there's a society that are aware that the Scorpion King is coming back because of the or can come back because of a prophecy, and so they think the only person who can defeat the Scorpion King is Imhotep. So they resurrect Imhotep so that Imhotep can defeat the Scorpion King, and that would give him command of the army of Anubis so that he could take over the world.
Yeah.
That's what the plot is, and it's Alex. Alex is the little kid, and Rick and Evie and Jonathan and Ardith Bay are all trying to stop it. Alex has the bracelet of, I think, the bracelet of Anubis on his arm, which is like what makes him so the bad guys capture him, but they can't kill him because he's got the map, which is the bracelet which won't be removed from his arm. Anyway, what did you think of this film?
Like, we probably have the same drop off in quality, but mine's just starting from a slightly lower place. Like, this is your classic, still all right, but not as good as the first one sequel.
Yeah,
it's very like, let's just do the same thing again in a lot of ways, but this time they have a kid, and this time there's a bigger villain they have to fight. It's a textbook sequel.
Yeah.
Like, down to being worse.
Yeah. Look, I will concede that I am clouded a bit by nostalgia for this one. See, I can do it.
But it's better than the first one.
I would have seen this almost as many times as the first film. I remember
999,999.
I remember being very giddy getting to go see it at the cinemas. It was probably the like most grown-up movie I'd ever seen at the cinemas at the time. I saw it with my dad and my brother. I was 8 years old, and man, it was cool to see an 8-year-old boy on screen named Alex, who I resembled a lot in 2001. Like, I was blonde. That's about it. But all blonde white kids look the same. I'll say it. I think it's a very rewarding film to see after seeing the first one so many times as a kid, because there's so many dialogue callbacks in this, and it's like it's not even the type of film you would expect to have as many callbacks to the first one as it does, but like there's things like when he's like, I can't work out this last symbol. It's some sort of bird, a stork, and it's an anemophis, or however you say it. It's like echo dialogue, which is I think it's all right. I don't think it's like nice fan service that doesn't have any big deficits, I guess. But I think there is plenty wrong with the film. For me, there are the three biggest grievances I have with it. I don't like that it's retconned so that Rick and Evie are like these reincarnated chosen ones. I think that's so stupid. I think whatever charm Jonathan possessed in the original has completely gone by this one. I think, and it's even worse in the third film, but here he's like relegated to mainly play against the kid, and in certain lines it feels like he's literally acting in like Barney or something. Like the way he delivers the lines is the way a 40-year-old man would talk to a child who they're teaching to act while acting with them, so like there's one part where they both collectively defeat one of the characters, and then they have to go find Rick, and Jonathan goes like, great job, Alex, now let's go help your dad. And it's real like, what a weird line delivery. And thirdly, I think the Anubis jackal warriors are very stupid, too stupid for the movie, and kind of stretch the magic too far. Like I like it being
it's
zombies.
Another one of those like sequel things.
Also outrunning the sun, the gymnastics raptor scene of the film, very much, which is when they work out that they have to get Alex to the pyramid of the Scorpion King before the sunlight hits him, and so Rick picks up his son and runs, and you see the sunlight chasing them. And as many detractors from this film have pointed out, in real life the sun would go the other way. Where the sun is rising from would mean that the sun would be moving towards them, not moving after them.
That's so funny.
So it's a pretty silly scene, and I think there's a lot of comparisons I was thinking between this and the Lost World Jurassic Park, because I rated this on Letterboxd, and I was like, this is the best sequel that's not as good as the original. And I thought about it, I was like, that's not true. The Lost World is the best sequel that's not as good as the original. And they have similar, like they each have like a really stupid scene, but they also both have really cool moments. One of those moments is exactly the same, because I really like in this film when the pygmy mummies start attacking everyone in the jungle, and it's very similar to the raptors in the long grass scene from The Lost World. I also really like the double-decker bus car chase where they fight the mummies. I think that's fun. Basically, it feels like a theme park ride version of the first film, where everything is
Mm.
bigger and better, and some of the well, not better, bigger. Some of them are better.
Mm.
Some of the ideas work. And
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of thing. And like yeah,
Yeah,
like
this is a movie like the first one I get from a fan perspective. This one I get from a studio perspective.
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. I do think they do a pretty good job uh, with Rick and Evie feeling like lived-in characters we haven't seen for nearly a decade. This was made 2 years later, but is set nearly 10 years later. And I could easily believe that they are two people who have aged gracefully into their early 40s. Like like Rachel Weisz especially, like she's like a nerd in the first one. The first time you see her, she looks really like dorky, and then the first time you
Mm.
see her in this one, she's like beautiful Rachel Weisz as you imagine her when you picture her. But it's
Well,
like
she still is.
yeah, exactly. And now she is the age that the character was playing in that movie. And I buy it, and the way their love still feels like it's real. It's still electric, I think. And I think when Evie is briefly killed off in this movie, she gets brought back to life. But it's a genuinely well acted and emotionally heavy scene for both the audience and for Rick, who until he discovers she's been
It's well acted for the audience. The audience did a great job of pretending to cry when that happened.
Yeah, I know I did. Before he discovers she's been resurrected, he seems genuinely affected, like he's changed, and he's trying to finish the adventure, but he's lost. It's very clear he's lost something, which isn't true of a lot of movies when characters die. You know,
Well, and it's also and that's one of the things that like made Brendan Fraser so great as well, is that like it's like we talked in George of the Jungle. It's like, yeah, you hire a comedic actor for this, but it's like he's genuinely fucking jacked in that film, and it's like that, like George of the Jungle should be. And in this, it's like you see, like, yeah, no, the dude actually has some acting chops as well. I mean, he's in Best Picture winner Crash.
Yeah.
You don't have bad actors in Crash. It won Best Picture.
I think a similar situation is when Alex is kidnapped towards the start of the film, and Rick and Evie have to save him, and they don't go like, "Oh no, our son is gone. Let's go save him," and crack some jokes along the way. Like, and almost to the film's detriment, it sucks a lot of the fun out of it. Like, they are two grieving, worried parents for the middle part of the film. And it's like, you know, like in Final Destination, like someone's best friend will get killed, and then in the next scene they're like,
and they'll be like, "That happened."
yeah, right, exactly. Like these are films which you could get away with that and don't, and I think that's a point of note. The best thing this film has going for it is the Scorpion King plotline. I thought that was a cool, fresh idea to distinguish the film from the original, similar to the Gray's Sports Almanac and Back to the Future 2. It's a fully formed idea that makes it like this is its own thing, this is its own movie. It's absolutely doesn't reach its full potential, but if you go, The Mummy Returns is about there's this other ancient evil that's coming back, so they resurrect the mummy to go fight it. It's like, yeah, that's a cool, that works, you know? Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Scorpion King, Richard, because it's going to become a bigger part of our lives in the next week. Well, let's talk about the famous scene from this movie where a very poorly rendered CGI model of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson atop the body of a giant scorpion is resurrected and comes out, and people have compared it to a PlayStation 2 cutscene. People have said it ruins the film. People have said it's some of the worst CGI they've ever seen. It was recently, well, not recently, a couple of years ago now. It was sort of the big video that the Corridor crew had, which is a YouTube channel that like reanimate
VFX artists react.
Yeah. And they remade the scene, and I thought it didn't necessarily look better when they did it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's very like, look, we could do better, and it's like, okay, it is better, but it's like you've got better tools. It's not like you're smarter.
But even in 2001, you go, okay, so you filmed The Rock acting in a green screen. and then put that atop the CGI body. But even his
Yeah,
face
just glue it
is
on.
CGI. Dude, you could though,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's weird. It's if the body looked as fake as it does now, but his head was actually him, no one would say anything. They'd go, it's
Well, then
on
it would
par
look
with-
like that scene in Infinity War when Mark Ruffalo's like, "Oh, you guys are screwed now," and it just looks insane.
Yeah, it is a very funny scene, and like something that I'll be like, yeah, you done fucked up in this movie that I love, where it's just this really poorly animated scene. Another really funny moment is when Rick kills the Scorpion King, and with a spear, the spear of Osiris, and then Imhotep runs in from off screen, goes down on one knee and goes, "No!" And it's framed in the worst way. It looks unintentional. Like every other shot in the last two films is from like good to competent, right? But this is like they just set a camera rolling, and he it's like Imhotep is running in to meet his mark, like Arnold Vosloo is. It's very funny. If you haven't seen it, look up the Scorpion King battle. It's when Rick stabs the Scorpion King, and then he says, "Go back to hell and take your friends with you," which is one of the many lines that I love from these two films. Yeah, I think that's a great kiss-off line. What do you think?
Good on you.
This just keeps getting better and better. That's another great one. Patience is a virtue. Not right now, it isn't. What's some? I just rattle them off.
You don't have to do this.
Please think of I have children. You don't have any children. Someday I might. All right. The television description for this movie, whenever it gets on TV, so like the TV guide description for this movie, across most cable or satellite services, has been apparently inaccurate for years. I Googled this, and like you Google it, and the actual TV guide website comes up with like, yeah, The Mummy Returns is on. Here's what it's about. So it's not just like, there's not just articles about how it's inaccurate. It's still on record inaccurate when you Google it. This is what it says. Two evil forces believe the 9-year-old son of adventurer Rick O'Connell is the key to the reincarnation of ISIS. So this suggests the plot was once very different, and I think that's a really interesting leak to for any film, that the way to find out like what the plot was almost going to be.
Yeah, I wonder like how that would happen.
Yeah, like you ask the studio,
because to write like a synopsis like that feels like something you'd do very late in the game, right?
Yeah, no, maybe you have a doc.
It's like the actual log line.
Yeah, you have a doc of synopses so that when the press come asking, you give them this to save time. And like it was obviously categorized in the wrong way, and so they gave them an old one. Do you have anything else you want to say before we move on to dumb IMDb trivia?
No.
All right. Well, here's some dumb IMDb trivia, Richard. Loosely translated, Dwayne Johnson's line, Haku Machente, which is what he yells in battle. It means it's hot as hell.
Can you smell what I'm cooking?
Almost. It's as dumb as that. That'd be great if it was, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? I'd be okay with that. Like if it's an Egyptian, that's kind of fun. Freddie Both, who plays Alex, was a big fan of The Mummy, the 1999 film. He'd seen the film over 30 times. Richard, an 8-year-old after my own 8-year-old heart. He passed on the opportunity to play in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone to participate in this movie because The Mummy is one of his favorite films. He knew so much about the film, he even served as sort of a consultant for the first film, for this film, for the other crew and cast members. He knows, it's written in present tense, he knows every line and detail of the movie. When anyone on the set of The Mummy Returns needed to know something about the first movie, they asked him. This was his first professional acting job. Was this written by Freddie Both? Ardith Bay, who's played by Oded Fair, is the only person in the film who refers to Imhotep, Arnold Vosloo, as the creature. This is explained in the novelization, which states that Ardith Bay, as do all the Magi, fears even referring to Imhotep by name while the mummy is still in his undead form, calling him he that shall not be named. Ardith Bay in the novel overcomes this unease and reluctantly refers to Imhotep by name after the mummy's regeneration. It's so stupid. I just think that's so stupid. In the original script, when Rick asks Izzy, "Where's your airplane?" Izzy responds that he lost it in a poker game. Guess where this idea is explained more of?
The video game?
No, in the novel, in the
Oh.
novelization of the film. In real life, this is my favorite piece from this whole episode. So, Oded Fair, who played Ardith Bay, in real life, Oded Fair doesn't have any face tattoos, but he does have a small ghost on his back. Look out! It doesn't say tattoo. It doesn't clarify that it means tattoo. In the technical commentaries for the deluxe edition of this film, it is mentioned that in the battle, 32,000 animated warriors were present, but according to other sources, 64,000 warriors were present in their second appearance in the film. If these statements are accurate, the total amount of warriors is brought to 96,000, a far cry from Ardith Bay's most likely hyperbole-laden assertion that the army had as many members as the Sahara Desert had grains of sand. But still, not a force to underestimate. Evie getting killed and resurrected is amusing when you take into account how many films after this would have Rachel Weisz in a posthumous character, including Constantine, The Constant Gardener, and The Fountain. And then The Lovely Bones, where her character's daughter fills that role.
Have you seen The Constant Gardener?
No.
We studied it in year 13 English, and it's a real good movie.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's probably because you grew up with it, bitch.
In year 12 I studied Juno. Fucking hate it. Cannot stand that film. Constant Gardener is it's a bloody good film. The Constant Gardener has so much like subtext and like beautiful filmmaking by Fernando Meirelles. Juno is trash.
All right. Shall we continue with The Mummy Returns dumb IMDb trivia?
Okay, sorry I wanted to talk about The Constant Gardener for a moment.
There was the segue. It was unnecessarily harsh. I apologize.
Yeah.
After literally going to... Okay, I wrote this down because I can't make sense of the sentence structure.
Yo, fuck, can someone suggest The Constant Gardener for the Generic Movie Podcast on Patreon? I'm reading the plot synopsis. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, generally, we should watch it. It's a real good movie.
Okay. After literally going to hell for her, Ankh Cinnamon abandons Imhotep when he asks her to save him. She arguably crossed it twice earlier when she tricked the Englishmen into opening the chest, thus making them easy prey for Imhotep, or when she cruelly stabbed Evie to death right in front of her brother and son. I don't know what it's saying. I don't understand the sentence.
Those aren't words.
Yeah. In the beginning, Evelyn accidentally kicks a snake towards Rick, which he dodges while giving the line, "Those are poisonous, you know." Besides the fact that snakes are venomous, not poisonous, the snake was a scarlet king snake, which isn't deadly or venomous at all. And it's like, there is a piece of trivia in there. Why have you written it that way?
Yeah,
the piece of trivia there is the snake that is kicked towards Rick is actually a non-deadly snake.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's not dumb. But like to do it this way is like.
Do you know the difference between poisonous and venomous?
I get told it once every 18 months and then forget.
Do you want to give it a go? I feel like you know.
Yeah, it's been about 18 months since someone told me.
If it bites you and you die, it's venomous. If you bite it and you die, it's poisonous.
Huh. That's pretty fun.
That sounds like
which snakes are people biting?
Like that feels like that was the most fun way it was explained to you. Because your reaction, you were like, "Huh, I did know that, but that's a good way of putting it."
Yeah. The scene in which the curator's hand was torn off is explained in the novel of the film. The pygmy mummies used the pyramid of Shere as a place of worship and savaged intruders in any way they could. And in that version, the curator's hand was not stripped off its flesh, but completely torn off instead. Rachel Weisz's character Nefertiti, is originally called Nefertiti, but the producers felt that people would make boob jokes about the name, so it was changed to that of another Egyptian queen.
Nefer breast.
your rectum. For some reason, on IMDb, they'd list a chain of karmic deaths included in the film.
Right.
So, like, deaths that characters deserve, but then they only list 3. So they list Hafez, Ankh Cinnamon, and how Imhotep die. But it's like, why is this a piece of trivia? Yeah, the bad guys died because they're bad guys. No shit. Watch a fucking movie, IMDb.
Whew.
The events behind the curator Baltu Hefez's demise appeared in a somewhat different manner in the film's novelization. Hafez's name was Ford Fakhri, and he wore an off-white suit with a simple fez instead of his more elaborate clothing shown in the film. Along with this, Fakhri mutilated himself with an shear. In the book, it was revealed that the Scorpion King's people followed an ancient ritual that required someone seeking total trust from his master to scalp himself. The curator does this, as does Imhotep before the Scorpion King. Imhotep proclaims the phrase, "My fat ass." Miphatahs, meaning I am your disciple, to the Scorpion King, and is spared. The curator, before he can show his sculpted skull, is stopped by O'Connell, who, while wearing the Scorpion King, takes the golden helmet from a statue and rams it on the curator's head, mispronouncing the phrase as your fat ass. O'Connell's doing this was explained as putting the curator out of his misery. The Scorpion King does not see Fakhri's gesture of submissiveness and kills the curator at once.
Nice.
And finally, Evie also brings her son along on the expedition at the start. It turns out Rachel Weisz wouldn't feel the same way, as this is the reason she didn't return for the 3rd film in 2008, because she was not wanting to travel after just having given birth.
Okay.
And that brings us to The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Empire in 2008.
Emperor.
I was wondering, I was like, how many times will I accidentally say Empire on this?
I always thought it was Empire.
Which makes less sense. It should be Emperor. I don't know
Yeah.
why I think it's Empire. This was directed by Rob Cohen of the Fast and the Furious fame.
What else is he known for?
He also directed Dragon, the Bruce Lee story in 1993 and Dragonheart in 1996, making this his 3rd film to feature the word dragon in the title.
I was more meaning he's also got a bunch of sexual abuse allegations against him.
Does he?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Famously.
Well, I will revel in what I'm about to say about this movie.
And it's not even the like, oh, he's a bit problematic. It's, I don't want to say this on the podcast.
Right, okay, Jesus, okay. I did not see that on his Wikipedia page when I...
Under sexual abuse allegations, the whole fucking section
No,
he's got?
I went to, what are his other films that start with dragon? Well, what do you think this piece of shit managed to score on Rotten Tomatoes?
In the teens.
It's 12%, it's not even in the teens.
Wow.
It's below the teens. And what is The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor about?
Jeez.
Do you want me to just read the thing
Yes, please.
I've prepared? In ancient China, the sorceress Ji Yan curses the Emperor Qin for killing General Ming, Ji Yan's secret lover, and stabs her with a dagger. Centuries later, the O'Connells was tricked into awakening the Emperor and must stop him before he awakens an army and rules brutally once again. Sorry, I got these from IMDb. That's why they're shit. What did you think of this film?
I think this is the best one.
Fuck you! Fuck you!
No, like this is like I really like the idea of it in some ways, like that it's still kind of a mummy, but it's like, oh, how do other cultures do this? You know? And I was like, yeah, like if you're doing a globe-trotting adventurer a la Indiana Jones, that's how you would keep this franchise going. The film is bad.
Yeah,
but
totally.
on paper, like they say, oh, they're making a 3rd mummy movie. It's about Chinese mummies or the Chinese version of a mummy.
No, it's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
But it's like, the film is just bad. It's like, it's not a good film. You lose, you have Maria Bello instead of Rachel Weisz, who, fun fact about Maria Bello, did you know that she is one half of the first 69 scene in a mainstream movie? The other half is Viggo Mortensen. It's in the film A History of Violence, which
Oh,
was
yes,
also
yeah.
the last film released on VHS. The last mainstream
I
movie.
did know that, actually.
How
I'm
do you
not
know
going to
that?
tell you how. Haven't seen the film. Seen the scene, though.
It's a
I
real good movie.
we should watch it for Generic Movie Podcast.
Yeah, man.
So
Suggest a double feature: Constant Gardener and History of Violence.
bro, you only liked it because you had a 69 at a very young age. Okay. I'd only seen Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor once before, not
wow.
a million times like the others. My brother and I went to see it in cinemas as sort of a celebration. You know, we grew up with this movie together, and it goddamn blows. Like, as you say, the only good thing about it is that it's set in China and that it's exploring other mummies. That's cool. But barely any of the humor remains. And when there are jokes, they feel like someone translating another language, like season 4 of Community, like trying to replicate an auteur's style, but not very well. Because Richard, I was very nervous to say this, but I think Stephen Sommers gets it. That's what I think. We're gonna have to disagree on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree. We don't have enough proof, or like we need a quote from Stephen Sommers about why this film didn't work, and then I would maybe agree with you,
Okay.
because we don't necessarily know that it was Stephen Sommers that made those films work.
Right. Interesting.
Like
Okay.
it could be a
no,
writer.
I've taken it on board.
Yeah. All right.
Yep, I've taken it on board. So as you mentioned, Rachel Weisz didn't return. And so instead of saying that she's off in Egypt doing something, like being like, "Oh, Evie couldn't come; she's busy in Egypt,"
It's not her fight.
With the with the Bembridge scholars, you know. You talk about the Bembridge scholars for 2 movies. You're not going to use that as an excuse to write her out of the movie. They recast her. They recast one half of the sexiest and steamiest blockbuster romance in the last 30 years. And not only do they expect it to be the same,
they recast her with one half of one of the fucking sexiest.
but it's not about it's about the combination of the 2 actors, which Maria Bello and Brendan Fraser do not have in this movie. And they draw your attention to it by having Maria Bello literally say lines like, "Remember when the mummy had me tied up and you came and saved me?" It's such a visceral, "How dare you stand where he stood" moment. Like, I'm like screaming.
You just reminded me, though, her first line in the film. Can you remember what the actual line is?
It's the next thing I have to talk about. Yeah. Was it? Or it's written here somewhere. Okay, this is alluded to in the text. We're at her book signing, where she's written The Mummy and The Mummy Returns as like sort of Mills and Boon novels.
Yeah.
Someone asks her if the heroine is based off her, and she says no, she's a completely different person. Which, is that a metatextual reference?
Yes, and it's fucking amazing. I cackled. This is our randomly placed useless statistics. This is our second Brendan Fraser franchise of the year, which draws attention to the recasting in the text.
Amazing! I didn't think of that at all. That's great.
Like
that
genuinely, I cackled when I heard that. I was like, that got me. That really got me.
But still, I think it's so playing with fire to then have this character be like, "Remember this moment from."
Like they shouldn't have recast. I'm fine with Rachel Weisz is off somewhere else, but then it's like introducing just introduce a platonic female acquaintance. That's fine. Like, all of this is fine, and the audience knows, everyone knows what happened behind the scenes, but recasting is the weirdest choice.
Yeah, it is the weirdest choice, eh?
Yeah.
And I think I think another
it's not like there was unfinished business in the story of Evelyn and Rick. It's not like, we have to wrap up their arc. So Evelyn's key to this film.
Yeah.
It's just that, like, she's in the other 2. So
what they could have done, this would be a bit more dramatic, is like if you focus on Alex and maybe like Jonathan and don't even have Brendan Fraser in it, or maybe he's like in one scene. Like, I obviously that's not a good move either, because John Hannah and the guy who plays Alex in this movie don't have the charisma. But I'm saying, like, it's they don't work without each other, so don't have either.
Well,
of them
yeah,
if you
like
can't
yeah,
have
or
both.
what they should have done is like a reluctant hero thing that like and to use like a weird comparison of like a kind of a similar film, Jurassic World 3, is that
Jurassic
like
Park 3.
Jurassic Park 3, sorry, that like the kind of the good idea about that like the other films in that franchise are missing is that like yeah, he doesn't want to go back to the island. Like, take him from like he's over his adventures. Take him out, force him into the situation, and then you get the reluctant hero.
They bring Brendan Fraser in a Sam Neill and Jurassic Park 3 kind of role where, like, we need an expert we've awakened a mummy. That's not Alex O'Connell. It's different characters, different fun new characters. They bring Rick O'Connell in as an expert reluctantly, and then there's a scene where he calls back home and Rachel Weisz, from the comfort of her own home, can be like, hi, I'm in the movie. Like, just like they do with Laura Dern in Jurassic Park 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, and then have the mummy go, Alan.
Yeah.
not even Rick.
Yeah. If she didn't want to go because she was wanting to look after her son, you can give her $10,000 and film it in her house.
Yeah.
Like a cameo. So, as mentioned in the dumb IMDb trivia from The Mummy Returns, Vice reportedly didn't want to return because she had her kid, but apparently she also had problems with the script. No shit. Bello commented during an interview that the new Evie is different from the original Evie. She has the same name, but she is quite a different character, said Bello. At a news conference in Shanghai, Bello told the audience that Rob Cohen has created a new Evelyn. In the first two Mummy movies, she was all actiony and lovely, but this Evelyn might be a little more forceful in terms of her martial arts skills and shooting skills.
Rob Cohen knows all about being forceful.
I don't like what you're alluding to. I'm going to have to read this up after the podcast. I think the Yetis and the dragon in this movie are fucking dumb and out of place.
Very Uncharted.
Yeah, but also they're probably not worse than the Army of Anubis, or probably just as bad as the Army of Anubis.
It feels very
Scorpion,
like
King Scorpion.
Yeah, like, oh well, this was in the last one. How do we? But it's like no, people didn't like that in the last one. That's not the thing you should carry over.
Yeah. The thing that blows my mind is that this came out only 7 years after The Mummy Returns.
The thing that blows my mind is this came out 7 years after.
Really? Are you Are you on the other end? No, because my perception of time, it feels like it came out 20 years later. Like, if a sequel to something that came out in 2014 came out this year, I wouldn't really think of that as notable. But I lived my entire life between Returns and Dragon Emperor.
My mind was so blown that this came out 8 years apart, like 7 years apart, because in my mind, there's always been 3 Mummy movies. Right. There's a bunch of movies I don't care about, I've never seen.
No, this was.
That's the thing. You have the opposite experience. I looked up because I was trying to do the same thing of like, it's like if a movie came out this year that was a sequel.
I've got an example. Do you have one?
Yeah. What was your example?
My example is Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet. Same amount of time between the two.
Right, yeah. No, but I was trying to think of like a film that had a sequel 2 years later, and then if a sequel came out now, being 7 years later. So, that would be 7 years ago, 2014. Yeah, if there was a 2014 film, which is a sequel to a 2012 film, but
is there an easy way to find this out, or do you have to go in blind?
Just go in blind, I guess. 2014 films, because
are you going to find out live on podcast? This incredibly complex statistical anomaly that you.
No, do you know what? Fuck
what?
you.
What?
Do you know what the answer is? Imagine
I don't. Not fuck me. I'm glad. I'm happy that this happened. What is it?
Like genuinely. So a film that came out in 2014, and the original came out. A sequel came out in 2014. The original came out in 2011. And imagine if the sequel came out this year. Do you know what the answer is?
What?
If War of the Planet of the Apes came out this year.
Huh. Yeah, well, I mean, that's not exactly what. Right? Okay, this was. I thought you were literally trying to find an example of a 2011.
Oh right, yeah. No, I was trying to think.
2014 film.
But that's crazy that it was that. Anyway, the the example I thought of was that if because the 1999, 2001, 2017 add 10 years, it's like if the third Sherlock Holmes film had come out in 2017. Or 2018. But yeah, anyway, like it blows my mind. This came out like after The Dark Knight. Like in my mind, The Dark Knight like ushered in a new era of cinema of like. But in the scene, and Cloverfield came out the same year. That it's like that was when I got into film. That was when I became interested in film. The Mummy, like I don't remember a new Mummy movie coming out, and it was after that time, you know. And so, yeah, like it's just insane to me that I must have known a new Mummy movie was coming out, and I must have, but that none of that. Yeah, that's
I've
insane.
been completely distracted by the realization I was wrong with my Wreck-It Ralph comparison, because Ralph Breaks the Internet came out in 2018, not 2019. But that is a good point. But I sincerely had the complete. I was sitting there thinking about how the difference between 2019 and 2009 felt. Yeah, that's 10 years, but the difference between 2009 and 1999 is like my entire life.
Yeah.
And how that's, give or take a year, that's what it was. And it's like that's so funny that I really like that we have the total opposite.
Another example is if Captain America Civil War had come out this year.
Right. There you go. So why wouldn't that be the same? Because it's got a whole cinematic universe behind it, so it completely changes it. The concept for a third film, though, it basically started not too long after Returns, with an early draft around 2004, 2005, reportedly containing a lot more connective tissue between the Chinese and Egyptian mythologies. With in the original, I don't know if it was a script, it might have just been a treatment. The Chinese sorceress was sent to Hamunaptra by the Dragon Emperor and makes like a terracotta version of the Book of the Dead. And it was going to be like it's directly related to Imhotep. It sounded like the Dragon Emperor was going to have a lot more Imhotep-like qualities as well, the way he killed his victims and regenerated his body. The Dragon Emperor was also going to do a big face in the snow wall, similar to what Imhotep does with sand and water in the first two films, respectively, which is such an obvious idea that I'm gobsmacked they didn't do that. Because like the promotional material for the first film is a wall of sand with a face in it. That's the image.
It's such an iconic poster.
Yeah. And they didn't like I would have liked that. I wouldn't have even been mad. It just feels like the obvious thing to do with it. The Emperor actually gets knocked out by an avalanche in this film, which is funny because he can literally control the elements. But he gets killed. He doesn't get killed. He gets buried under an avalanche. I fucking hate this. This movie is my Joker origin story. That like so offensive this movie was when it came out. It felt so disingenuous. It felt so. It was such a slap in the face for those of us who grew up watching The Mummy.
I've found an example.
Okay.
So the Muppets came out in 2011. Muppets Most Wanted came out in 2014, and we're getting the Muppets Haunted Mansion this year.
Very nice. Very good job. Nice. It's not exactly. I mean, it'll probably be
it's not. It's more of a TV special, but it's still like yeah.
No, anyway.
No. Oh no! Wait, I found another one. Okay, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2 years earlier, Amazing Spider-Man, and we're getting presumably getting Andrew Garfield back this year.
Oh yeah, that's another one that's like I don't think that is actually the same thing.
But it's also like
I see where you're coming from.
That like an entire lifetime existed between these appearances.
Right. Yeah. No. Sure. Yeah. Anyway, I hate Tomb of the Dragon Empire, dude. I think it sucks. I think it's such a slap in the face to anyone who grew up with The Mummy. I think anyone in their right mind would agree with me. This is Roger Ebert's favorite film in the series.
What the fuck?
What the fuck, right? He gave it 3 out of 5 stars. He says, now, why did I like this movie? It was just plain dumb fun is why. I disagree. I don't think it is. Like, the first one is that.
I don't think
this
it's
isn't
incredibly intelligent.
It is absurd and preposterous and proud of it. The heroes maintain their ability to think of banal cliches, even in the most strenuous situations. Brendan Fraser continues to play Rick as if he is taking a ride at the Universal Studios tour, and Maria Bello has real pluck as she uses a handgun against the hordes of terracotta warriors. The sacrifice of the sorceress in relinquishing not only her own immortality but that of her daughter permits love to bloom. Although, would you really want a bride who is 4,000 years old, even if she was going to die? I'm at a loss. I don't know why Roger Ebert would think this. It's such a. I just disagree with not just like it's not just like, oh, I don't agree. It's like, no, Brendan Fraser isn't as good in this. I think he was glad to get the role because this was right in the middle of the Brendan Fraser dead zone, and I think you can definitely see him wanting to enjoy playing Rick O'Connell again. There's a super cringy scene in this where they're on a wagon and Jonathan sets on fire and Rick goes, "Your ass is on fire!" And Jonathan goes, "What? My ass?" And then he starts hitting it with a coat, and Jonathan yells, "Spank my ass! Spank my ass!" And it's like, what the fuck? It's like an attempt at humor from an actor who's not very funny.
Yeah,
which
right.
I think John Hannah can be funny, but this is not an example of that. I'm so bewildered when I read that. Like, it's like he literally says in the review, I read the whole thing because I was like, this can't be true. And he's like, this is the best one. And I was like, no one else in the world thinks this. What are you talking about? So weird. The dumb IMDb trivia, I've only got 2 pieces for this film, but the IMDb trivia section for this movie is just a wasteland of unverified reports that feel like glorified fan fiction more than anything else. So here's one of them. The filmmakers originally considered bringing back Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep, except this time he's a least resort ally who helps the heroes defeat the Dragon Emperor. Vosloo hated the script and didn't want to make a mummy movie without Stephen Summers, so he declined to return. Oded Fehr was also asked to reprise his role as Ardith Bey. Fehr declined because Imhotep was not going to be in the film, and had felt there was no Imhotep, then Ardith Bey had no point or reason to appear in the movie. You can't verify this anywhere. That's just someone made that up.
Yeah.
And lastly, there was originally going to be a 3rd sequel titled The Mummy 4: Rise of the Aztecs before it was cancelled. Brendan Fraser and the cast of the 3rd film had signed up for the sequel. Antonio Banderas would have played the main antagonist.
Sweet. Yeah.
No, he wasn't! What are you talking about? Like, that didn't happen.
Although, if that had happened, that would be our 4th franchise, which has Antonio Banderas in a sequel, but not in the original film.
Yeah,
because it was Cats and Dogs, Shrek, and The Expendables,
and SpongeBob.
And SpongeBob. Yeah, he's in The Expendables, right?
I don't remember. I didn't remember him being in Cats and Dogs, to be honest.
Antonio Ben.
This podcast is just a series of us finding out the funnest actor statistics, but the slow way. Like, we just realize it as it comes up.
Why does it not have like a?
Why is Antonio Banderas not on the internet anymore?
It doesn't have his filmography like on his page.
Right.
Okay, is he in Cats and Dogs? Oh, he's in Spy Kids, but of course he's in the first one. Shrek 2. Maybe he's not in Cats and Dogs. Expendables 3, SpongeBob movie. If we ever cover the Hitman's wife, the Hitman's bodyguard, he's in the Hitman's wife's bodyguard.
Oh, there you go. Well, Richard, we're now moving on. We've finished the trilogy, the Rick O'Connell trilogy, whatever you want to call it. And just tying on the end here, we're going to talk about the most recent iteration of The Mummy, which is called The Mummy. And it came out in 2017. It was directed by Alex Kurtzman of Star Trek Discovery fame. What do you think it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's another famously bad one. I'm going to guess in the 20s.
It's 16%, so
Oh.
a little more than Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. What is this film about?
Uh,
I've got a sentence. Do you want me to read the
yeah,
sentence?
sure.
It says the whole
Yeah.
thing. U.S. Army Sergeant Nick Morton, a soldier of fortune who accidentally unearths the ancient tomb of entrapped Egyptian princess Amenet.
Hmm.
That's what it says.
The most interesting thing about this though is that Tom Cruise actually like dies in the film and is resurrected because of the curse. So technically Tom Cruise is like, well, like again, he's not mummified, but like Tom Cruise is the
Yeah.
undead person, but
No,
he's the hero.
it was so funny when they hyped up the Dark Universe announcement, and it was like Javier Bardem is Frankenstein, Angelina Jolie, Bride of Frankenstein, Johnny Depp, the Invisible Man,
Well, Javier Bardem's
Frankenstein's
Frankenstein's monster.
Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll, Sophia Batella as the Mummy, and of course Tom Cruise as Nick Morton, the guy from the Mummy. Do we need to explain the Dark Universe? Do you want to explain what the Dark Universe is really quick and what happened to it?
Yeah, so the Dark Universe was this plan. You kind of just outlined there the characters that were cast, and it was one of these like we're announcing a cinematic universe before the first one is even out, and they did this. There's this photo shoot. They announced it. They revealed the logo. It's at the start of this film, and then this film bombed, and they not even that quietly, just abandoned the Dark Universe.
Very funny. Very funny that a film can be that bad. But also, this was their second attempt at doing it. They'd made Dracula Untold already, and that very clearly sets up a cinematic universe at the end, famously so. And then that didn't get a sequel and was abandoned as well. They've recently did a good Invisible Man movie.
It's a really good movie.
Why was it good? Because it wasn't fucking trying to set up anything, and probably won't continue to set up anything. The same guy is doing the Wolfman. But
yeah, although the Invisible Man kind of sets up like the Invisible Woman at the end, it seems like.
Yeah, but that's a sequel to the Invisible Man. That's hardly a cinematic universe. What do you think of this movie?
Again, I really liked some ideas of it. I like the idea. Okay, you're going to do a cinematic universe, and you want to have sequels, but you want to still call your sequels The Mummy, and you still want them to star Tom Cruise. That it's like he technically is like, and I like the way the film ends. Or I like the place the film ends in terms of setting up a cinematic universe. And part of me watched this and was like, I want to see the Dark Universe. Like, I want to see what would have happened. I want to see the alternate universe where there is a Dark Universe. It's baffling that, and I understand the appeal of a Dark Universe, but it's baffling that you would start with the Mummy. Like, you make 2 or 3 good. Like, this would be like starting the MCU with Spider-Man. Like, you're taking the one that everyone already loves in a different version. It's like establish everything is good and then introduce your rebooted version that's different. Like, it's just starting in such a strange place. And then also, like,
they should have started with maybe Dracula.
But yeah,
who was conspicuously absent from the cast for sort of the opposite reason of what you just said, because the most recent iteration was not beloved.
Oh yeah, but it's like like, because also they're trying to do a big budget thing. And I remember because when we first covered The Mummy, it was like we'd maybe seen a trailer for it, or it's like, isn't Tom Cruise is going to be in it? I don't know. I was drunk. You were high on painkillers. We knew Sophia Batella. The Mummy was going to be female. It's like, okay, that's the big change, I guess. But I remember like Russell Crowe saying that the Dark Universe films would, quote, scare the shit out of you, and that they were going to try and make these like globe-trotting, like action, big budget movies, but like actually have genuine horror elements. And it's like, I mean, that's I'm keen to see that.
I would love a scary Dark Universe. I don't like the name Dark Universe because, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is just what it is. Like, that's just what it's called. Dark Universe is like we made a moniker for it. Because what it is, it's the Universal Monsters universe.
Yeah.
They should have called it Universal Monsters.
Umu.
The Umu. What a great call. That's great. That, like, it's silly, but it's like you get people saying it, you know? What's the next movie in the Umu?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like it is one of these movies that like I would like to like.
Mm,
And there's actually so much I like about it.
mm,
Like I'll be honest. Um but yeah, it's the confused tone and the whole
yeah.
thing just being kind of, and again, like this is almost first time director Alex Kurtzman. He'd made another
Mm,
small film called People Like Us. But
mm,
it's like, yeah, these kind of things where it's like not really, yeah, and it's like it had so many writers. Christopher McQuarrie though, like
mm.
he's fantastic, does great work with Tom Cruise. Sidney Lumet's daughter um
Oh yeah,
wrote it. Um
interesting.
but it's one of these things where it's like very clearly a lot of people are trying to get their names on it. And I trust someone like Christopher McQuarrie to write a film, and especially like a Tom Cruise vehicle and that kind of big action film. But
Mm.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what's wrong with it, is that it's a Tom Cruise vehicle, essentially. Because you, like, first of all, you're saying you want to start a cinematic universe, which
Mm.
famously work when they're able to talk with the other movies happening in them. And then you cast a man famous, for better or worse, for taking over the movies that he becomes a part of. So
Mm.
I feel like Tom Cruise is not congruous to
Yeah,
a
although
cinematic
like
universe.
in terms of controversial gets it's, Tom Cruise gets it, man. Like,
No, no, no. Okay, but to his detriment, though. I'm not sure if Tom Cruise does get it, Richard. I
uh,
think he gets some stuff, but I think he's also like so freaky in some other ways that it
I think
undoes all the getting it.
importantly, Tom Cruise isn't a producer on this film, and he is on like all of the Mission Impossible movies. And I think Tom Cruise, you listen to Tom Cruise talk about like why he does the things he does in Mission Impossible and the new Top
Mm,
Gun and things like that, and it's like he fully understands why people go to the cinema, and he understands like what this kind of movie should be. And I think crucially, not having him be part of that creative process is actually to the film's detriment. And it's
well,
like,
I've got some news for you.
oh
He may have not officially been part of the creative process, but he sure as hell made himself a part of it. It's
yeah,
been quite well documented that he essentially hijacked the entire project. He reportedly made his own role bigger and made Sofia Boutela's role smaller, which is a weird move to do in The Mummy.
yeah.
Universal denied that Cruise had a negative influence on the production. They said Tom approaches every project with a level of commitment and dedication that is unmatched by most working in the business today.
Uh,
However,
That's true, I think.
well, would you like to know what Alex Kurtzman said?
What?
The Mummy wasn't what I wanted it to be. I'm no longer involved in that and have no idea what's going on with it. I look back on it now and what felt painful at the time ended up being an incredible blessing for me.
Oh, yeah.
So he was heave-hoed out of it. People are like, why would you get a director who's only got one like indie darling under its belt? It's like, because they're
Well,
easy to control.
yeah, but he
Like,
also like again, he'd written a bunch of just terrible films.
right,
I'm just pulling up the film to actually double check if Tom Cruise was not a producer on it. He's not listed as one on Wikipedia, but he
right.
very well may have been.
Mm. I don't think that like so. First of all, I think this is leagues ahead of Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's. I feel very similar about this as I do to the Venom movie, and in that it's like everyone said this was way worse than it was.
Hmm.
But I still feel very ambivalent watching it.
Yeah, like it's like if you were really committed, you could have come out next with an incredible Invisible Man movie,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
got in different just give it to Christopher McQuarrie and do
Mm,
a good Mummy movie sequel.
yeah. Yeah. I think that it has a very hard time balancing comedy with horror, which is
Yep,
famously something that
yep,
The Mummy 1999 got right.
yeah.
And
Like
I,
getting just Nick from New Girl
yeah, yeah,
just to pop up and make jokes. Like it's so confused, just like in the same scene. It's yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if this kind of comedic acting is in Tom Cruise's wheelhouse either. Like,
Hmm.
it's really one of those falls from grace that comes about when a studio is so set on setting up something and getting all the elements right.
Mm.
And like, you know, we've said it before, the MCU was ostensibly an accident that turned out right, you
Yeah.
know, like if you watch Iron Man 1, the only thing that hints at a sequel is the post-credit scene. You watch this film and
No,
Dr.
and
Jekyll's the
also
main character in it.
when Rhodey's like next time, baby.
Right, sure. But that's a sequel again. That's
Yeah, but
almost
you
setting
said
up a
sequel.
sequel to Iron. Oh, sorry. Well, setting up a universe like this has a whole scene of Easter egg made for yellow circle YouTube Easter egg spot videos where it's like they go to the place, the organization that hunts monsters, and Dr. Jekyll's in charge. And that skull over there's got some pretty sharp teeth for a human, and that one looks a little bit like some kind of creature from maybe a, I don't know, Black Lagoon. And I just think that we remember when Scoob came out. We did a ready to record about this very subject, and we were like, how the fuck is Scoob this obtuse with its cinematic universe building? Like, this is why Scoob should have been smarter. This movie is why. Because this movie showed you how bad it can be to try and do that.
Well, just don't call it Scoob. Just call it, we're setting up a fucking Hanna-Barbera universe.
Yeah. And don't call it Dark Universe. Just call it Universal Monsters. That's such a good title. Umu. I feel like I would have said this on record on the podcast back in 2017, but I'm much more interested as sort of what Russell Crowe painted of the cinematic universe.
Yeah, sorry. Also, because
scary.
you'd seen this movie before, right?
Had you not?
No, I hadn't.
No, me and my brother went to it again as like a, hey, we grew up watching The Mummy.
Yeah.
Let's go watch this one. But yeah, I saw it in the cinemas. And yeah, I think it shouldn't. Here's why you don't cast Tom Cruise, aside from all these other reasons. This shouldn't be an action movie. Like, I don't need it to be an action movie. I'd rather it was a scary.
Well, the only reason it's an action movie is because of the 99 one, which is again why it's such a baffling decision to start with it. And like the decision to start with it is clearly like, well, people love the 1999 one. Let's try and do that again. And it's like, that was lightning in a bottle. Like, you look at the sequel, they couldn't do it again.
Yeah. I've written here, and I couldn't find any. I remember reading this somewhere, but I couldn't find the article. I feel like people don't like Tom Cruise as a sexual being. They don't like thinking. It's one of those things where it's like how Tom Hanks always pees in his movies. Like, it's like when in Tom Cruise movies now, he's not. In Mission Impossible, like easily his most successful venture, right? He is married, which is technically in a romantic entanglement, but like strictly off the table.
Yeah, he's not pursuing people. You don't see him flirt.
Yeah, Mission Impossible 2 is the only one that's got a sexual tension to it, and that was back when Tom Cruise was still kind of a sex symbol. Now it's like, we want to see you fall out of a plane, we want to see you go to space, we don't want to see you have flirtatious conversations with a woman you had a one-night stand with. It's uncomfortable. It's weird to watch.
Although you take that to its extreme in Magnolia, and it's his best performance.
But because of that,
right? That's the same thing. Paul Thomas Anderson did it directly after Magnolia, but it's like, you're taking what people find creepy about this person and making that why the character is creepy, because he did that Punch Drunk Love immediately after, and it's like, we don't like Adam Sandler because he's a creepy man-child. It's like, imagine actually meeting Adam Sandler and making like a realistic version of that.
Yeah. And so, because there's a scene at the start where the love interest comes up to him and is all like, we spent 15 seconds, like it says that he lasts 15 seconds in bed because they'd slept together. And it's like, I don't want to fucking think about Tom Cruise having sex, 15 seconds or not. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's very much in the shadow of The Mummy 99, as you said, not the sex thing, but the movie's failure as a whole, which brings us to the question: is this canon? Is this in the same universe as the Mummy 99? Right? Is the Book of the Dead? It shows up in what could be described as a cameo,
an insert shot.
Yeah, the what's her name? Jenny, the main lady in this. She smacks a bad guy with something and drops it to the ground, and we get a half a second shot of what she dropped. It's the Book of the Dead from Hamid Aptra.
It's funny. I spent the whole movie. This is going to be interesting to anyone else, but I spent the whole movie trying to like figure out where I had seen Annabelle Wallace, who plays Jenny, before.
Mm.
And then I realized right at the end of the film, she just looks like someone I work with.
So what do you like? I turn to you for questions like this because you're a lot more strict on questions of canon. Does the Book of the Dead being in this make it part of the same series?
No.
No? Why not?
No, it's one of those. I would say it's like, because the thing is that like the Book of the Dead could just exist in this universe as well. It's like is the fact that there's a mummy, you know.
Mm.
But it's very clear the same book, it has the same key. But it's one of those breadcrumbs left in case they want to canonize it later on. I
Sure,
think.
yeah.
That's what it
Yeah,
felt
yeah.
like to me.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Very confident of the filmmakers as well, isn't it? To be like, hey, here's a reference to a film you like a lot more than this one. Everybody, look, it's your favorite. So the famous sort of conversation that happens around this film is, of course, at Tom Cruise's insistence. Tom Cruise's insistence. The plane crash scene that happens was an actual. Not plane crash, but an actual stunt. The production made use of the vomit comet, is what it's called, and the parabolic flight to simulate the illusion of weightlessness. Doing a total of 64 takes, everyone got really sick, and the resulting scene would probably have looked fine if it was faked. It doesn't look particularly impressive, and I've seen similar scenes done, and were fake, and they look just as good. But probably even more famously than that, the part of the trailer was, well, it wasn't leaked. They dropped the wrong trailer for this movie, where the music wasn't included, and it just had some sound effects, including some very funny sound bites of Tom Cruise screaming, and he sounds like Charlie Day.
It essentially, it's like it was like it was like exported missing several audio channels is what it feels like.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's a little like only got dialogue, and not even like the foley of a plane crash happening.
Yeah,
it's very good.
I read a bunch of reviews for this film to sort of nail down what everyone's exact problem is, and pretty much everyone talks about how it's a soulless Tom Cruise vehicle and it's at odds with itself for that. And literally every one of them has like a plethora of mummy or Egyptian puns, which was hell to read through for someone who hates puns. If I have to read one more sentence about how the dark universe is unraveling. Oh my God. Shut up! I get it. A mummy unravels. But I did find I thought was quite a, I found it. It's the quote on Wikipedia. From IndieWire, David Ehrlich, he gave the film a D- and calling it the worst film of Cruise's career, which I think is also a significant thing to call out. I think he's right.
I remember reading,
because he was so careful with what he did for years.
Well, that's the thing, that like you look at Tom Cruise's career, and I remember reading this as like a legitimately verified fact in late around 2010 probably. That was like, say what you will about Tom Cruise, he literally hasn't had a box office bomb since the early 80s. And it's like this is a 30-year career without a single bomb, and it's like, yeah. That he's a bona fide movie star.
That's probably the most weight the sentence "say what you will about something" has ever carried. I think. Say what you will about Tom Cruise, but this is the quote from the review. It's one thing to excavate the iconography of old Hollywood. It's another to exploit it. This isn't filmmaking. It's tomb raiding. Which, despite the pun it's not really a pun. That's a great way to put it. It's like this is tomb raiding. This is taking something you know and something you like and flashing it around and not putting any of the genuine effort in to make it work. During an interview in April 2021, one of the screenwriters for this film, Eric Heiserer, admitted that he knew the Dark Universe franchise was doomed from the start. He said he sat in on a big meeting, and there were several other writers who were hired to also write it. Heiserer was going to write a reboot of Van Helsing, and this is when they're talking about the Dark Universe.
Van Helsing's a better way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the main character of your
He's
of
the
your
yeah.
dark universe. Yeah. A lot of this is what he said. A lot of voices, and none of them could agree on much. They couldn't even decide if the monsters should be heroes or villains. He said it was like watching all of his relatives argue during Thanksgiving dinner. At the end, the attitude was basically that everyone involved would just make it up as they went along. He even joked that he may as well have written the most oddball screenplay he could think of because there was no way the franchise would survive long enough to actually produce his film. So
That's good.
that's pretty telling. Got one piece of dumb IMDb trivia for you here. When Armanet is mummified and is put in the sarcophagus, the lid was too close to Sofia Boutela's face and it hit her right in the nose, and all the bandages around her head were soaked with blood. After the bloody bandages were removed, a second take was done. Only this time, the lid was further away from her face.
Damn. Like it is with like I mentioned before, but like this film was so much set up that my skin should crawl watching that mummification scene, and it's very run of the mill. It could be out of a Boris Karloff film, but I will say though that one like it's the simplest change the film makes, but a female mummy is super interesting. It completely changes the film, and yeah, that was great.
We've got some appropriately placed useless statistics. So this is our second franchise to have a film starring Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaji, who we first saw in Ace Ventura When Nature Calls, and who we would know as Mr. Echo from Lost. He plays a main character in The Mummy Returns. He's sort of the anti Ardith Bay in The Mummy Returns. So that's fun. You mentioned this before, but I love it. This is our second franchise with a film which features both John Hannah and Kevin J. O'Connor after Herbie, as both actors play main roles opposite Bruce Campbell in 1997's The Love Bug. I remember talking about that on the Herbie episode. This is our second franchise in a row to include a reboot starring Eric Avari, who was in the Planet of the Apes 2001, the Tim Burton one. And in the Planet of the Apes episode, I pointed out that he's the kind of character who shows up in things just to die later, even though he didn't die in Planet of the Apes, and he does die in The Mummy. He's the one who tells off Evie for knocking over all the bookshelves. And he's like, when Ramses destroyed Syria, that was an accident. You, my girl, are a catastrophe. He gets killed by a bunch of the mummy hordes that walk around going, Imhotep, Imhotep. And my flatmate was like, what are they saying? Which I thought was a funny thing to ask in a movie where they say Imhotep 100 times. This is our second franchise, which features a film starring Dwayne Johnson and a film directed by Rob Cohen, but they're not the same film. He didn't direct the one that Dwayne Johnson, but it also, the film that Dwayne Johnson is in led to Dwayne Johnson getting a spin-off film.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the same film. That's the same franchise. So of course talking about The Fast and the Furious. And that brings us to continue the franchise, Richard. So next week, we will be covering the 5 Scorpion King movies. One of them is Dwayne Johnson in it. These are spin-offs to The Mummy Returns, of all films. Maybe the most unsuspecting film to ever get a spin-off series spun off from it. This will complete our conclusive, comprehensive coverage of the Mummy franchise. Outside of the Scorpion King, though, it is worth noting that the Brendan Fraser series did have an animated TV spin-off. This was a series called The Mummy, the animated series, later changed to The Mummy, Secrets of the Magi, which loosely adapts elements from the first 2 films, with Rick, Evie, Jonathan, Ardith Bay, and a 12-year-old Alex traveling the world and battling Imhotep, who is voiced by Jim Cummings. So he sounds like Winnie the Pooh. It's very funny. Nice. It ran for 2 seasons of 26 episodes, the classic. Every single fucking animated series based off a movie ran for 2 seasons of 26 episodes. In 2001 and 2003, I watched the pilot episode. I was like, yep, I could watch this on What Now on a Sunday morning.
The second season debuted on my 10th birthday.
Wow. Add that to the list of things that happened on your birthday that we've talked about on this podcast. I think that it doesn't have like the first 3 episodes act as a movie, which would have been
Yeah.
that's what Mighty Ducks had, and that would have been useful for some continue the was it film franchise follow ups down the line. But I don't know, maybe we could watch a couple of episodes for an episode of film franchise follow ups one day. There were actual plans to make more sequels after Dragon Emperor, but the cast was signed on for 3 more films, but nothing as conclusive as what that IMDb trivia would have you believe. These were scrapped in favor of in 2012 in favor of the Dark Universe, which of course had a whole host of scrapped sequels and spin-offs and related films and shared universe that we already talked about. All right, what's your continue the franchise? This is where we pitch our own sequels if you haven't heard the show before.
So again, like, haven't put all that much effort into it, but it's just an idea that I like kind of thought of and then actually came to think like, fuck, maybe this is like what you do with it and that's how you make it interesting. But we talked about, so like just making the mummy female is like immediately makes it more interesting. The what was it, one of the Hammer mummy movies where it's like it's a platonic love, and it's like a
The
guardian
Mummy's Shroud.
Yeah, there's the shroud. But I was like, maybe like let's have a gay mummy, and that it was like, and it was, you know,
World's
like,
not ready for that.
and you know, it was again, you know, you've got like the forbidden love, and yeah, I don't know, I'd just been more interesting, but like, you know, like super like have the same kind of like sexuality to it, but homoerotic. Anyway, it's just because I thought of call mummy by your name.
I mean, it's a similar idea to the Clive Barker's one. I mean, with the transgender mummy, I assume there would have been a lot of queer because Clive Barker's gay himself, I believe. So that would have probably had a lot of the homoeroticism in there. Nice, man. Call mummy by your name. I love it. My continue the franchise, I have to admit, I have to give some credit. It's not really my idea. I've adapted it, but the ways in which I've adapted it are not as good as what the actual idea is. So it's technically my completely, you know, at the end it's my idea, but the nugget of genius I did not come up with. It's something that I want to bring attention to, though, in a video essay by Josh Keefe in 2019. He suggests, he did a video like The Mummy, why it's an enduring blockbuster, and he suggests that the O'Connells should have been the main characters of what we would eventually call the Dark Universe. And I love this idea. I would have loved, instead of The Mummy Returns, I would have loved to have seen a series of films: The Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Creature from the Black Lagoon, all be connected through the O'Connells' various adventures. I think the way you do is you keep the Mummy the same as it is, and then you make Dracula, where it's an expedition in Transylvania where they become unraveled in Dracula. I think they wouldn't discover Dracula. It's more like Dracula would be like maybe the financier of their dig,
Right,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
turns out that he's, you know, that sort of thing. But after that, they form some kind of 1930s X-Files equivalent, so that it's not like a coincidence that they're running into monsters everywhere they go. It's no, now they are an adventure team that are hired by people wanting their communities to be saved by monsters. Maybe Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing, which Stephen Summers also directed, maybe he joins the team. Yeah. So that's the idea. Stephen Summers, pretty interesting career because he did Van Helsing, so which is, you know, a breath away of being in the same universe as the Mummy and the Mummy Returns. I think very they could easily have made a reference which would have included it in the same universe. And he made the first G.I. Joe movie in like 2008, and I believe that movie like has an O'Connor in it. O'Connell, sorry, in it, and it's like there was speculation that it's an intentional connectivity between the two franchises, which is funny that you'd connect Universal monsters with G.I. Joe. You're right, you found a moth.
I have found a moth.
Yeah, I can tell.
It's been there for a while, and I've tried to avoid it, but it got within striking distance.
He also directed a film before The Mummy called Deep Rising. Have you heard of this film?
I have heard the name.
Yeah, it's very similar tonally to The Mummy. I haven't seen it properly. I've seen.
It's on my
Tell him to say something.
Oh, he's on my bottle of bottle of wine.
Deep Rising, I don't think I've properly seen it as an adult, but I remember catching it on TV, and it's full of things it's like a giant octopus attacks a sinking ship, and the main character. It's got Kevin J. O'Connor in it. That's his name, Kevin J. O'Connor. And like it's got things like at one point the main character is picked up by the octopus, and he sees its big eye, and he pulls out a gun and goes, "What are you looking at?" So the same sort of like,
what are you
cheesy,
looking at?
What are you looking at? So yeah, Stephen Summers, an interesting guy.
His career kind of reminds me of Martin Campbell.
Yeah, a little bit. I think his style is maybe a little more recognizable than Martin Campbell's, who's more like he makes good movies, but I don't know what the trademark Martin Campbell's moments are. Whereas Stephen Summers,
All right, I've trapped the moth under a glass.
Okay, good. Well, Richard, that brings us to the end, officially the end of like movies that are called The Mummy. We aren't done completely with our mummy journey, with the Scorpion King due next week. But shall we go to Letterboxd and rank that franchise in a little segment we call Rank That Franchise? We're over at letterboxd.com/cultpopture. You can find a list of ours called FFF Ranking, where we rank every franchise we've ever watched. And this franchise, so I guess this won't include the 2017 Mummy, so it's just the trilogy. And we've got 129. I'll add the Mummy to it, and we're going to discuss very briefly. I surprisingly don't think there'll be too much disagreement of where it should go. So
this will be number 1, right?
Yeah. So, okay, let's have a look. So the Mummy Hammer series is at 122. Would you say this has more enjoyment in it than the Hammer movies? Yeah, I would too. Above that, we've got 300. Above that, we've got, funnily enough, George of the Jungle. I think...
Honestly, I think you're going too low. We can go much higher than this.
Okay, thank you for that permission. All right, let's go up to, say, The Brave Little Toaster at 102. What is it, better than The Brave Little...
I think we can go top 100.
Okay. Okay, Lady and the Tramp, 87. Is it better than Lady and the Tramp?
Okay, we've got a lot of bad films in here.
We do. I'm going to go up quite a lot higher.
Yeah.
All right. I think Bad Santa, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is maybe a bit. That's at 68. Should we make it 69? Hilariously.
Let's do it.
I mean that tracks, right? It's between Bad Santa and Crocodile Dundee. So like at its worst than Bad Santa. It's one, I think, great film and a sequel that's not quite as good, and then a really bad third film.
Or quite poetically, we could put it with Pirates of the Caribbean.
Where's that at?
59. I think they're such comparable franchises.
Absolutely. Do we want to put it above or below? So 60?
Yeah.
So below Pirates of the Caribbean, but before Twilight?
Yeah.
Sweet, sounds good. I'm happy with it there. So it is the 60th best franchise we've ever watched.
And only 3 below the Nymphomaniac Constant.
That's pretty... I mean, that tracks with what the movies are as well. You know? Yeah. I forgot about the Nymphomaniac Constant. I should have said at the beginning, are we above the Nymphomaniac Constant or not? Yeah, and that is... I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it. It wasn't as volatile. I made such a big deal, and it feels like almost to spite me, you were gentler than I was expecting.
Yeah, that's why.
I was ready for you to reveal that you liked The Mummy 2017 just as much as The Mummy 1999, like right at the end, and I was like, I'm gonna need so much stamina to get to this.
Okay, because I did give them the same rating on Letterboxd, and it is like. One like,
yeah, but I know now that you meant to give The Mummy 1999 4 stars, so
and I have changed it, but it is like at the time that it's like, but it is the classic thing of like, I've been told all my life The Mummy is the greatest film of all time, Mummy 1999 is the greatest film of all time, and Mummy 2017 is the worst film of all time, and they're worse and better than the reputation they hold, so they kind of meet in the middle. But it is like 1999 is obviously better than 2017.
Okay. Well, Richard, that's it, and we're left here empty-handed once again.
Is that a Mummy reference?
Now you say, I wouldn't say that.
Looks like you're on the wrong side of the river.
No.
AJ, this is as good as you're going to get.
No, please just say, I wouldn't say. Look at me and say, I wouldn't say that.
That's not what I would say.
I just want you to kiss me as we ride off into the sunset together. Here we go. We're riding off into the sunset together. What's the Mummy music? It's like. Right, goodbye, everybody.
Do you want to plug like where to find shit?
Oh, fuck! Hey, everyone, if you like this show, you can find us at all the places. Find us at Cult Pop Show on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Where else are we? We're on Patreon, patreon.com/cultpopshow if you want to donate. Lots of fun rewards over there. And we've got a Discord, and you should join the Discord because it's a good time, and you can talk to us directly. Yeah, on TikTok, AJ from Cult Pop Show on TikTok. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for the post-credit scene, which is going to play after this music stops. And yeah, anything you want to say, Richard?
Nah, we had a good ending there with me hilariously humming "Kiss from a Rose," but now we're stuck with the plug to end on.
Looks like we're on the rocks. Okay, welcome along, everybody, to the post-credits scene. This is the segment at the end of each episode where if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/cultpopshow, you get to give us something to talk about in this, the post-credits scene. Richard, lay it on me.
All right, today's post-credit scene comes to us from Dylan Hutton, who writes, "What franchise needs to die? Film, TV,
Mummy.
video game, film, TV, video game, whatever. For me, it's the Fantastic Beasts films. Everything about them is ugly now. The Mummy. Fantastic Beasts is a great example.
That's the best example, yeah.
Because the thing is that, like, throughout this podcast, it's rare, but it's incredible when it happens, is that we've seen franchises save themselves. And so things like The Mummy, things like Barbie, like all these ones that we like famously hate, I would love to get a new entry of. Fantastic Beasts, yeah, J.K. Rowling shouldn't get more money.
Yeah, and like the second one was so fucking bad as well that like even from just a superficial level, it's like I do not want to see more of this universe. Certainly not in this form.
I don't want the next one to be good. Where like most franchises, I would love to love the next one. This one, I'm like I would hate if the next one is incredible.
I'm just looking at our franchise rankings to see if there's any obvious ones. Maybe Terminator needs to die. They should stop probably making Terminator movies. You don't agree?
No, I agree. But like Terminator, it feels like you've had so many goes at this. Just stop trying.
Yeah, exactly. There's a new Medea film coming out. That's my answer. He said he was retiring the character. Medea, that's the answer.